Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the first ever virtual Brazil PDAC 2021. I am Carolina Albernaz, CEO of the Brazil-Canada Chamber of Commerce, and I will be your MC for the next 5 days of program. So I wish you're all here in Toronto enjoying this beautiful cold sunny day. A year ago, most of us were having no idea that PDAC would be the last social event that we would attend in a long time. We basically went into lockdown a week after PDAC, and here we are still today. This year will be a little bit different, but I hope that you do find the content that we put together fruitful and relevant for your business. The platform you're in provides also the opportunity to connect with your peers, colleagues, and professionals from the mining sector from all over the world. Don't be shy, and during your networking breaks or before and after the events, please go to the networking tab and check out who else is here online with us. Meaningful connections can happen online, so let's make the best of it. Before we start, I would like to remind you of a couple of rules. So the discussions today will be live and performed mostly in English, but Minister Bento Albuquerque's message will be done in Portuguese. We are offering simultaneous translations for the whole program, so here is a quick video on how to activate the simultaneous translation.
To have access to simultaneous translation, follow these steps. Click on Audio Settings, click on Computer Audio, click on the translation link located in the session description. You are all set. If you choose to go back to the original session audio, click on Join Audio. Click on Join Audio by Computer and close the window. You are all set. Para ter acesso à tradução simultânea, siga os passos. Clique em Audio Settings, clique em Leave Computer Audio, clique no link de tradução localizado na descrição da sessão. Você está pronto. Se preferir voltar ao áudio original da sessão, clique em Join Audio, clique em Join Audio by Computer e feche a janela. Você está pronto.
So if you have any questions during the program or how to access the translation, please know that the link is in the description of the session, but we're also including the same link in the chat. You'll also be able to ask questions to the panelists as the discussions happen, so please use the Q&A box in the Zoom screen to send questions to our speakers. We'll do our best to answer all the questions during the sessions. If there are any questions left that can be answered live, we'll revert to you after the event. And before I introduce our first speaker and we start this amazing program for the Brazil-Canada or Brazil PDAC 2021, I would like to thank the organizing committees of Brazil PDAC 2021, led by AGIMBE, the Agency for the Development and Innovation of the Brazilian Mineral Sector, for the partnership and trust. I would also like to thank the other members of the committee, the Brazilian Ministry of Mines and Energy, and the Secretariat of Geology, Mining, and Mineral Transformation, IBRAM, the Brazilian Mining Institute, ANM, the Brazilian Mining Agency, ANPM, Brazilian Association for Mineral Research Companies, CPRM, Geological Survey Brazil, ABIMAC, Brazilian Machinery Builders Association, and CCBC, Chamber of Commerce Brazil-Canada. I'd also like to thank all our sponsoring companies for the trust and support. And we have a long list this year, thank God. Our platinum sponsor, Vale, our gold sponsors, ALS, APN Capital Brazil, EDC, Aerocopper, Mineração Caraíba, Nexa Resources, Serabi Gold, and Wheaton Precious Metals. And our silver sponsors, Forbi Mining, Amarillo Gold Corporation, Baker McKenzie, Belloson Mining, BMA Law, Brookfield Asset Management, Sescom Barrier, CBPM, Equinox Gold, GE21 Consultoria, Geosol, Great Panther Mining, Horizonte Minerals, Jaguar Mining, Kinross Brasil Mineração, Landing Mining, Promon Engenharia, Sigma Lithium Resources, the Toronto Stock Exchange and Toronto Stock Exchange Ventures, and Valor Metals. And last but not least, our partners, Embassy of Brazil in Ottawa, the Consulate General of Brazil in Toronto, Global Affairs Canada, and Protiva Results. This event would not be possible without your support. And then lastly, I would like to thank our staff, our amazing staff, Mariana Nadai, our social media and communication wizard that's been helping us promote this event, our incredible team of interns, Thiago Moreira, Cecilia Pinheiro, Sukchen Sidhu, Ita Esmali, Marian Johnson-Renkine, and Surya Suresh for their contribution, commitment, and hard work to put this event together. The members of our mining committee, Frederico Marques, Daniel Risica, Edson Ribeiro, and Greg McNabb for the continuous support. So without further ado, I would like to invite Frederico Marques, Director and Chair of the BCC Mining Committee, Head North America and Off Council at Sescom Barrier, and founding partner of C4G Inc. and co-founder of 4B Mining, to perform the opening remarks. Ladies and gentlemen, Frederico Marques.
So, ladies and gentlemen, distinguished guests, delegates, and speakers, good afternoon. Boa tarde. My name is Frederico Marques, and I'm here today in my two capacities, as the director and chair of the Binding Committee of the Brazil-Canada Chamber of Commerce, and in my new role as the head in Canada of the great Brazilian law firm Sescom Bahia. On behalf of my colleagues at Sescom Bahia and the Brazil-Canada Chamber of Commerce, I would like to welcome each of you to the 15th edition of the Brazil-Canada at PDAC, for the first time 100% exclusive online. Last year, we all left Canada, Brazil-Canada events at PDAC without knowing and fully appreciating the magnitude of the COVID-19 disease, declared a pandemic by the World Health Organization a week after PDAC 2020. Days after that announcement, we saw most of the world shutting down and going into a lockdown. Last year, our Brazil-Canada at PDAC event focused on the potential and opportunities of the Brazilian mineral exploration and mining industry, looking ahead to this new decade. This year, in addition to showing potential and opportunities of the Brazilian mining industry, our speakers will share their thoughts with us about challenge and resilience, trends, and what their views has changed and is changing in the Brazilian mineral exploration and mining industry since we all met here in cold Toronto last year. I must say I'm really missing hosting each of you here in Toronto, not only because it is always warmer when we have more Brazilians up here, just kidding, but not only because I truly enjoy the technical discussions we always have and how much I learn from each of you, but most importantly, because it is a great opportunity to catch up with and meet so many friends, colleagues, and industry experts. We will all miss the personal interaction and the fun we have every year during PDAC. Unfortunately, staying at home is the only way we can save lives and be safe. Thank you for staying at home, and thank you for your support and participation. Our hearts, prayers, and thoughts are with those that are going through difficult times, dealing with the loss of loved ones during COVID pandemic. I hope we have the opportunity to see each other later on the BCCC platform online. We really appreciate your online participation, and please note that I'm referring to participation and not attendance. That's right, the BCCC has invested in this amazing online platform we are using today that not only allow us to have this year, in coordination with the Brazilian and Canadian governments, IBRAM, ADIMB, ABPM, CCBC, one of the most complete and cutting-edge online events about the Brazilian mineral exploration and mining industry, but also allow us to better interact online. During the next few days, we will hear from great speakers, leaders on their areas of expertise, on hot topics about trends and challenges for the global mining industry, including mining regulation and policy, equity, debt, and alternative financing, ESG, diversity and inclusion, legal trends on debt, equity, and M&A in Brazil, advancement of women in the Brazilian mining industry, and projects and investments opportunities that will hopefully shorten the distance among us and make us all feel closer together by attending, participating, and interacting on the BCCC online platform, where you can also access the special content prepared by our fantastic speakers. The Brazilian mineral exploration and mining industry is truly resilient and has a deep and humble understanding about the role it plays in society and in the global economy. It is interesting to note how the COVID-19 pandemic is reshaping the global mining and metals industry. For many different reasons, the challenge and opportunities created, imposed, and or brought with COVID-19 pandemic has impacted the global mining and metals industry in many different ways. The Brazilian mining industry reacted strongly, fast, and supported by the Ministry of Mines and Energy that issued Ordinance number 135 on March 28, 2020, which declared mineral exploration and mining processing of minerals products, mineral transformation, commercialization, and disposal of products generated in the mining production chain, as well as transportation and delivery of mineral products to be considered essential activities and therefore authorized to continue operating, subject to local regulations that are imposing specific restrictions on transportation, staff reduction, additional mandatory health safety equipment. According to a recent report of the Brazilian Mining Institute, IBRAM, the Brazilian mining GDP in 2020 was $37 billion, remaining on the same levels as in 2019, which was around $38.9 billion, despite the COVID-19 pandemic, which was mainly attributed to high iron ore and gold price and a slight increase in iron ore and gold production, around 3% increase on iron ore production in Brazil and 8% on gold production. Those are two of the main minerals produced in Brazil that together represent around 3/4 of the Brazilian mineral production. Many commodity prices have had an extremely strong end to 2020, to the extent that we now have many metal prices at or around multi-year highs, at a level that should incentivize new supply to meet demand recovery. Again, China was the main responsible for such performance, stepping in to absorb available commodity after a short downturn in its industrial activity due to COVID-19 in the first half of last year. Chinese industrial activity started to pick up again in the second half of 2020, and now it seems it will be followed by other economies, setting the stage for a strong start of 2021 for the global mining industry, reflecting economic growth, industrial output, and commodity demand, keeping up the good momentum for base metals and bulk commodities, such as iron ore, which, by the way, was the champion of price increase in 2020. Likewise, as we keep exponentially move towards clean energy and electric vehicles, battery metals such as graphite, lithium, and to a certain extent cobalt will definitely be on the radar, as demand for such metals are expected to 3-5 times fold in the next decades, and production must meet such expectations. Battery metals are definitely a hot topic for 2021, and everyone in our industry should pay close attention to it. On precious metals, indication is that the U.S. stimulus plan and the rising inflation expectation will keep price at prevailing levels or higher. The conclusion of this community brief is that we will definitely see a stronger mining industry in 2021, with companies generating robust cash positions that should be put to use to their organic growth or growth through M&A. A recent publication of a large global law firm shows that 2020 was also a robust year for initial public offerings, IPOs, in Canada, with over 70 IPOs completed on Canadian Stock Exchange and over 5.5 billion total gross proceeds raised. The Brazilian capital markets is also experiencing a boost in equity offering, having raised over $3.6 billion in 2020. On the other hand, the Brazilian real has devaluated significantly in 2020, having reached a record low after losing more than 40% of its value against the US dollar. According to UNCTAD World Investment Report, foreign direct investment has also decreased significantly in Brazil, almost 50% to 34.2 billion, which also is jamming the pipeline of investment opportunities in Brazil that continues to grow. The same report also shows that foreign direct investment in Canada has decreased 35% during the same period. Indeed, 2020 was a year of turbulent waters, but with the economy stimulus package that countries are implementing around the world, coupled with a general underperformance of the mining industry on the past decade and a new ESG and battery metals era, are creating the foundation of a new positive cycle for the mining industry, which is shaping up to be very interesting one, where many experts believe we will continue to see an increase in mining financing. In here, I'm including alternative mining financing as well, like royalties and metal streaming, but also an increase in the M&A activity with most of the major and mid-sized mining company well capitalized. I really can't wait to hear Marc Desaumur, senior economist at Scotiabank, on the commodity outlook for 2021. On this note, I would like to take the opportunity to once again congratulate the Canadian government and business community, and a special thank you for the efforts of the Brazilian government and the Brazilian mineral exploration and mining industry to raise the bar and lead the performance of the industry in Latin America, and to thank each of you to participate in our 15th edition of the Brazil-Canada at PDAC. Honorable Bento de Albuquerque, Brazilian Minister of Mines and Energy, and Honorable Alexandre Vidigal de Oliveira, Brazilian Deputy Minister of Mines, thank you for leading the Brazil Mineral Exploration and Mining Industry virtual mission to PDAC this year. We value the support and commitment of each member of the Brazilian delegation to PDAC. Considering the success of previous editions of our main Brazil-Canada at PDAC, this year we have separated our CEO talk show into two. One talk show with CEOs of company listed on the Toronto Stock Exchange, and one talk show with CEOs of companies listed on the Toronto Stock Exchange venture and private companies. The first talk show will be moderated by Rob Peterman, Vice President, Global Business Development at the TMX Group, and the second by Guillaume Legaré, Head of South America at TMX. Both CEO talk shows will be addressing trends and challenges for the global mining industry. Thank you again, Rob and Guillaume and the TMX Group for your continued support to the Brazilian mineral exploration and mining industry and to the BCCC. After our CEO talk shows, the Brazilian ambassador to Canada, Honorable Pedro Borio, will highlight the Brazil-Canada relations in the mining sector, and Roberto Xavier, Executive Director at ANDIB, will give closing remarks. Those of you who participated in previous events know that I couldn't end my opening remarks without first saying once again that Brazil and Canada are natural partners in the mineral exploration and mining industry and many other industries, and that Canada represents to Brazilian mining companies a great platform to go global, to access capital, and ultimately to grow their business, while Brazil continues to represent to Canadian mining companies incredible investment opportunities on a mining-friendly jurisdiction with extremely favorable foreign exchange rate, access to a giant domestic market, and a pathway to Latin America. And second, I could not finish without saying a special thank you to our CEO, Carolina Albernaz, the BCCC management, and our volunteers for their dedication, enthusiasm, and for thinking outside the box about how we could structure an online event for you. Finally, I would also like to thank our sponsors and partners. In reiterating BCCC's commitment to support Brazil and Canada companies and governments in increasing trade and investment and facilitating business transactions between the two countries, and on behalf of the Brazil-Canada Chamber of Commerce and Sesco Bahia, I would like to thank each of our speakers and panelists, wishing you a fantastic online PDAC convention, good business, and success. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Frederico. Thank you for the words. It's always a pleasure to work with you putting this PDAC together. So now we were going to broadcast a message from the Honorable Bento Albuquerque, Brazilian Minister of Mines and Energy, Please note that this message will be broadcasted in Portuguese, so I ask our guests that do not speak Portuguese to access the simultaneous translations by disabling your audio inside the platform and connecting with the link mentioned in the description. So I'll just give you a couple seconds to do that and connect with the translation, and we will broadcast the message from the minister.
Thank you, Carol. It's certainly a different event, and I truly hope that our members and guests and attendees participate and enjoy what you put together. Thank you.
Yeah, we're definitely we're very excited for the networking part, and I hope you're all enjoying the connections, the virtual connections. So I will broadcast the message from Minister Bento as part of our program.
Ladies and gentlemen, members of the Brazil-Canada Chamber of Commerce, dear friends, I thank the Brazil-Canada Chamber of Commerce for putting up this traditional event and for the kind invitation. I'm very pleased and happy to be able to address so many leaders of the middle sector with concrete interests in our country. This is a unique opportunity to present the path followed by the President Bolsonaro government with the objective of expanding and modernizing the mining sector industry in Brazil. When I participated in the same event in 2019, we were in the early days of the government. On that occasion, I presented the principles and objectives that would guide the policies in the national mineral sector. Today, after 2 years of hard work, I can confirm that we have made decisive advances in efficiency, predictability, safety, legal safety, and sustainability in mining. Since the sad tragedy of Brumadinho, which we make a point of not forgetting, Brazil has learned lessons and decided to follow a new path, definitely leaving behind archaic and outdated models. The new legal framework we approved in September 2020 puts us at the forefront in terms of protection, safety, and sustainability in the regulation and control of tailings dams. At the institutional level, we have taken important steps to strengthen the National Mining Agency. We expanded the computerized access of mining processes with gains in speed and transparency. We are making the necessary reforms and adjustments that are required in order to increase regulatory predictability, the efficiency of processes, and security of public-private relations in the mineral sector. Based on these pillars, mining is consolidated as one of the driving forces of the national economy. The challenge posed by the COVID-19 pandemic has made the role of mining in promoting the well-being of all and the development of the country. The mining sector emerged in 2020 as the most efficient in overcoming the crisis, reaching the best national result in terms of revenue and foreign trade. Last year, the value of ore exports was 11% higher than in 2019, going from $33 billion to $37 billion. The national output of ores last year reached the level of 1 billion tons. The amount of minerals exported was at about 371 million tons. Despite the pandemic, the mineral sector's trade balance increased by 28% in 2020, accounting for $32 billion. The sector contributed significantly to our trade balance surplus in a difficult year for Brazil and the world. In this context, we estimate that in $38 billion, the amount of investment in mining in the country until 2024. The opportunities are real and very diverse. My dear friends, These numbers show not only the strength of the Brazilian mineral sector, but also how right we were in terms of the policies adopted. In this regard, 2020 was certainly a milestone for the sector. In September, we launched the Mining and Development Program 2020-2023, a plan of goals and actions that has the purpose of achieving the quantitative and qualitative growth of mining in Brazil. The program has resulted based on the diagnosis of the country and with the support of several relevant players in the sector. As a result, 10 plans and 110 goals were established, referring to the various aspects of the mining agenda: governance, sustainability, innovation, the fight against illegal practices, management of efficiency, and expansion of geological knowledge, the advance of mining in new areas, and others. We should highlight the cross-cutting factor of the PMD, which is a socio-economic environmental commitment in mining, incorporating the promotion of sustainability in all its dimensions to the guidelines and objectives of the mining industry. We have already advanced in relation to the guidelines of the mineral transformation and innovation, aiming to add value to the sector's productive chains. We are concentrating efforts on critical minerals for high-tech sectors and also for energy transition, such as lithium, niobium, rare earths, graphite, uranium, and others. The Brazilian government is also determined to expand access to mineral resources in areas that are today limited to mining, such as indigenous lands and frontier zones. We will move forward in the regulation of sustainable productive activities in these areas. Before wrapping up, let me say a few words about concrete opportunities that are opening up for investments and businesses in the mineral sector in Brazil. The Ministry of Mines and Energy has worked tirelessly alongside the Brazilian Geological Service and the National Mining Agency to expand the geological knowledge of the Brazilian territory, the supply of areas to the market, and to stimulate financing for mineral activity. We should point out that among other initiatives, we have the effort to unlock the supply of areas that in the past had their mining process discontinued and are now at ANM. The current backlog of areas of about 35,000 should be fully offered to the market by the first half of 2022. In addition to that, there are the auctions of areas under mining titles held by CPRM, mostly for detailing of mineral research. In 2021, we're going to have the auction of 8 blocks of areas for various mineral substances such as copper, phosphate, kaolin, diamond, nickel, gold, limestone, and gypsum. This landscape of predictability, security, and greater efficiency that we are consolidated is an essential condition for the success of mining in Brazil. The other part will be up to the entrepreneurs and visionaries who will know how to take advantage of the opportunities. Count on the commitment and partnership of the Brazilian government to write a new chapter in the history of the mineral sector in our country, a chapter of prosperity and development with gains for all and tangible benefits for society. I wish you all an excellent working session. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Minister Bento, for your words, and congratulations on the work that you and Secretarios Vidigal teams is doing to improve the Brazilian mineral sector. So next in our agenda, I would like to invite Mark Desormeaux, I hope I pronounced your name correctly, a senior economist at Scotiabank, who will speak on the commodity outlook for 2021. So ladies and gentlemen, I would like to invite Mark. The stage is yours.
Well, first of all, some things to start off with. Thank you very much, Carolina, for inviting me, for having me here. Thank you very much, Frederico, for that warm introduction earlier on. And let me just say that it's an absolute pleasure to be speaking to this conference. It's very well known within the mining community, within the history of my organization. I know that a lot of economists have spoken here over the years. So I'm just very pleased to be here. And I thank you all for making the time today on a Friday afternoon. I'm going to take you through a few high-level macroeconomic themes, looking at the global economy as a whole, as they pertain to commodity pricing, of course, and then talk a bit about metals, both precious and industrial, as well as oil prices, which have had quite an interesting start to this year. Generally speaking, we see quite a bit of support for most of these commodities going into this year, and that fundamentally reflects a global economic outlook that is steadily improving on the back of a number of factors, which I've highlighted up at the top: easing caseloads, vaccination rates improving, and fiscal stimulus, which was mentioned a little bit earlier. I'll also add on a personal note that I wasn't able to come to this conference last year, so I'm very happy to be here, of course, but it also set off a bit of a reflection on my part as I was preparing these slides, because it's almost a year to the day that we had this conference last year and the lockdowns first started to come into effect in Canada. It shows us how far we've come, how much has happened over the last year. And I'll demonstrate today, as we see things improving, that is good news, but it shows how far we've come over the last 12 months. First message that I would like to impart upon you: when we look at the global economy, we look at what's happened thus far, trends in the data, it's clear that public health and economic health go together. Every country has had its own experience dealing with this virus, of course. I don't want to generalize too much, but generally speaking, when we look at the experience across the world, there's this pretty strong correlation between the loss of life, the severity of the virus's spread, and the severity of the economic impact associated with the virus and with the lockdowns. Essentially, the countries that have been successful in reducing the death toll, in keeping the virus under control, have tended to have the least severe economic impacts, particularly during the first wave. And the takeaway from this, of course, is that it is vitally important that COVID be controlled. That is ultimately what will drive the most of the economic prospects that we will face over the next year, even the next multiple years. So that's really the number one thing that we continue to track as we examine the global economy and as we make our predictions. Things are improving on that front, as I'll show you in a second, but there remain risks, of course, around virus variants and other different implications that can come from the virus. This should look over all of outlook projections that we make. So as I mentioned on this front, we're encouraged by recent developments. In particular, the diminishment of infection rates across much of the developed world has been particularly encouraging. We saw those lockdowns, very severe lockdowns, come into effect during very severe second waves in a number of countries starting at the end of last year. And while there has been pain associated with that, economic pain, there has been all kinds of complications related to the virus. It appears that the lockdowns are having their desired impacts across a number of countries, and we're seeing infections go down. Similarly, also encouraging is the fact that we now have vaccines, the vaccine rollout, ramping up pretty significantly in a number of countries. Highlighted a few there on the right-hand side. The US and the UK in particular have been very successful at rolling out their vaccination programs, getting people inoculated to this virus. And both these things, both the pace of vaccination, which is picking up, and the diminished caseloads that are being witnessed across a number of countries, these bode well for growth because we'll be able to reopen earlier on that and eventually resume activity in some form. Now, the recoveries themselves are getting there, as we say. Rebounds are underway across the world. Different countries are having different experiences, but we have seen a bounce back in economic activity, especially on the industrial side, and some strong growth in, I should say strong rebound in employment across a number of major economies around the world. So we're particularly encouraged of late by the curve flattening, the diminishment of cases, as I mentioned, and those vaccinations on the US, because the labor market recovery in the US has lagged that of other countries, as we can see on the right-hand side there. But broadly speaking, momentum has been positive, a little bit of slowing during the second wave in some countries, but the overall trend is positive. And we're encouraged by this, as well as by the ramp up in vaccinations and reduced caseloads. Now, it's important to note as well, though, that even within countries, not all recoveries are equal. Certain sectors have been able to perform quite well despite a broadly very challenging economic outlook economic conditions, I should say, that we experienced last year. I've plotted the US here and then Canada. We're a Canadian bank, we operate within Canada, but the US in particular, these are trends we're witnessing across the world. So some industries, those that are more remote work capable, and in many jurisdictions have been deemed essential, are actually doing quite well in the current environment. So look at the green line on the right-hand side, or the finance corner on the left-hand side, looking at the chart. Financial services, professional scientific and technical services, the technology industry experienced a relatively modest dip during the peak lockdown period, and they've been able to get back to growth, and in many cases back above where they were before the pandemic already. Finance, for instance, in the United States, even by the third quarter of 2020, was above where it was before the pandemic started. On the other hand, we have industries like accommodation and food services, tourism, arts, entertainment, and recreation, which are having a much more challenging time with COVID. These are the industries that are more reliant on people's ability to congregate in groups, and thus they have witnessed not only the deepest troughs in the first wave, but the slowest recoveries as we reopen and start to see vaccination. So that would be the purple line on the bottom there, looking at the Canadian chart, and then looking at arts, entertainment, and recreation, sort of on the top left-hand quadrant in that circle. It's a much bigger chunk. It's been taken out. The recovery has not been as strong. Another reason that we expect growth to increasingly pick up getting into the second half of the year is the pace of stimulus. And we've really seen most countries around the world, especially in the advanced, among developed countries, embrace fiscal stimulus as a means to get through the pandemic, and are now using it increasingly in their plans to bolster the recovery from the lockdowns as we get further and further into this year. Canada's near the top among G7 countries as of the last update that was provided late last year, but stimulus is coming online in a number of different jurisdictions around the world. The US in particular, the new stimulus measures coming online have the potential to generate a more significant boost to global growth, and those are encouraging for gains going forward. Quick chart on the Canadian dollar for those interested. We see an appreciation of it up towards 80 cents US in the coming years, and that reflects both increases in commodity prices, some of which we've already seen, as well as our expectation that risk premiums will diminish, investor sentiment will return, and the US dollar will become less attractive as a safe haven investment. So the implication of all this growth that we're now expecting and the outlook that we're increasingly projecting is the possibility of a pickup in inflation. We've seen strong money supply growth in the US in particular. Monetary policy, interest rates remain very accommodative around the world. And with that recovery picking up, expected to pick up, as well as we see potential growth being slow to recover as a number of sectors will face challenges to ramp back up in the recovery period, we have an output gap built into our forecast in the United States. Normally, economic models associate inflation with output gaps, and we do have inflation picking up in our forecast increasingly as of the most recent updates we did. But it's also important to note that an output gap now is not necessarily the same as one that occurred in, say, the 70s or 80s. There isn't as much sensitivity to the economic cycle in inflation as in the last several years and even the last decade, as we've seen in the past. So even though we do have an output gap building in our forecast, we don't necessarily expect huge increases in inflation. Now, that said, this is our forecast. As you can see, we have the United States price level picking up increasingly in the coming years. That reflects that improved economic outlook, the output gap building, as I mentioned, particularly as a result of the stimulus. So let's turn to oil. And both WTI and Brent have picked up very significantly over the last few months. That's really been a major story among commodity prices. Let's talk about what's driving that. On the demand side, in line with that recovery that I mentioned, we're seeing improvement in fuel consumption, particularly in the US. Jet fuel demand is still sort of behind where the others were, reflecting that diminished travel activity that we've seen amid this pandemic. But nonetheless, the trend is improving, if not back above where we were during last year in all segments of fuel consumption. On the Chinese side, there was, I should say, a big surge in oil imports last year, up to the point where it got up to a record level in 2020. And that was alongside strong refinery, strong processing activity in China. And that demand was part of what drove the oil price recovery and continues to support prices. Now, imports fell off a bit as of late last year, as we can see in the chart on the right-hand side. But with new import quotas coming in, having come in, I should say, already as of the start of this year, that allow for more volumes to be imported by independent producers in China, there's potential for a pickup there. And we've even seen in some early reports numbers indicating that oil imports are picking up again in China, suggests more demand side strength there as well. Alongside the strong recovery that we have, continued recovery, I should say, in China built into the next year, we've got growth up above 8% as of our last forecast. This is something that should support oil prices on an ongoing basis going forward. Turning to the supply side, this has perhaps been even more important for oil. In particular, compliance among OPEC members has been very high over the last several months, as you can see on the left-hand side. When we put our last forecast out in early January, we thought that there would be quite a bit of incentive to produce beyond quota levels so long as oil prices continue to rise. Those incentives remain in place, but nonetheless, we are continuing to see strong compliance with quotas, which is keeping barrels off the market and tightening the market, providing further pricing support. We got news yesterday that quota levels will be extended, or at least that there are discussions of quota levels being extended among OPEC Plus members. And that is something that, to the extent that it continues to be the story, should again keep the market tight. On the US side, we did see, as of the last several data releases, a little bit of a pickup in the number of barrels in storage that was related to that storm that hammered much of the southern US. But the trend is still diminishing from where we were, where tank tops were bloated and there were concerns about running out of storage. And B, prices have continued to advance beyond that. Markets are generally looking past the increase that we saw that was related to that storm, indicating that most participants are expecting this to be temporary. Turning to metals, the story really is about industrial production rallying. Stimulus coming online, industrial activity, trade activity picking back up is providing a lot of support for metals that are used in industrial uses. Copper, iron ore in particular have benefited significantly from that in the last several months. alongside supply constraints, issues, concerns about the ability to produce to ramp up over in Latin America. Now, looking back at the year that we saw in 2020, it really was atypical in terms of recessions, in the sense that China was performing quite well, especially in the second half of the year. And so we had this instance where the #1 consumer by far of metals was still performing quite well, driving that demand side, even as many other economies around the world, many other large economies around the world, were not operating at full capacity because of the impacts of the pandemic. Combine that with those supply side concerns, and we saw the price appreciation that we did. Those regional factors really did impact the price of industrial metals in the last year, combined with industrial activity picking up increasingly over this year, which is what we expect in our forecast. We do see continued support for metals prices in the near term. Turning to gold, it was also an interesting year last year. We fell as far down as below $1,500 US per ounce early in the year. That was when there was so much turbulence in the market, so much concern about potential financial stability concerns, that people went beyond the traditional safe haven investment in gold and were seeking out cash. Since then, we've had announcements of very low interest rates, very accommodative monetary policy for the next several years, which alongside continued uncertainty about the global economic outlook drove prices up to an all-time high above $2,000 US. We've seen some sliding of late, some diminishment in the price of gold, down even below $1,700 as of today. But generally for our forecast, we anticipate more stability. Gold prices as of our last forecast, in the 1,800 to 1,850 range for the next couple of years, reflecting that still accommodative monetary policy and remaining uncertainty about the global economic outlook, even as we are starting to see improvements. Of course, to the extent that we start to see interest rates coming up earlier than we had previously anticipated, if uncertainty continues to fall off as the outlook improves, that would present downside risk for the price of gold. We suspect that the current guidance provided by the Federal Reserve may be a bit optimistic, a bit cautious, I should say. If there is more and more inflation pressure materializing, there would of course be call for rates to come up earlier than anticipated, and that would have implications for gold prices. Finally, turning to silver, again, a metal that is subject to many of the same drivers as gold, inflation hedge, safe haven, driven by rates. But where it has stood apart from gold of late is with those industrial uses. Silver has a much larger industrial market than gold does. And because of this recovery narrative that's been increasingly built, stimulus coming online, more and more industrial activity picking up around the world, silver prices have benefited from anticipation of strong industrial use going forward. And so related to that, we've seen a lot of price pressures, prices getting up towards an 8-year high, near that 8-year high, and a gold silver price ratio that is far below where it was towards the start of last year. So again, so long as industrial demand remains robust, to the extent that we continue to see that recovery, that pickup in industrial demand, that's something that should support silver prices. On the other hand, if the global economy continues to surprise on the upside, then the metal becomes less attractive as a safe haven investment. And then in that case, we would see downward pressure on silver prices. So that's kind of a summary of where we are, a few high-level themes. Again, we see the global economic, the global economy, I should say, improving. The outlook has improved, prospects are improving. That reflects easing caseloads. It reflects the fact that more and more vaccines are getting into arms, and this allows us to reopen earlier, return to growth more quickly. In addition to that, the fiscal stimulus that is coming in many countries around the world is positive for growth. And these are the factors contributing to our more and more optimistic economic outlook. On oil prices, there's a lot of support there. There's the OPEC plus compliance that has been strong. Demand is improving despite some recent headwinds in the form of that US storm. We do suspect that the recent pace of gains will ease, but nonetheless, crude oil is very well supported. And then related to that recovery, related to that fiscal stimulus, the industrial sector is driving metals prices. And so long as it continues, metals prices should remain well supported as we progress through this year. And with that, I guess do we have time for questions?
I think we do. I don't see any questions in the Q&A. So if there's any questions that you like to ask Mark, he's here available. Otherwise, you can send us some of her questions. You can always forward it to him afterwards and connect you later. So Mark, thank you very much for being here today. We missed you last year, but I'm really glad that you're able to be here today. And we look forward to continue engaging with you in Scotiabank for the rest of the year. So next, I would like to then, since there is one question coming in here. So excellent presentation. It's more like a comment than a question. So thank you very, very much for your presentation here today. So next, without further ado, I would like to introduce our panel. So we have, as Federico mentioned before, two incredible panels today. The first one, both of them being moderated by TSX and the Toronto Stock Exchange and Toronto Stock Exchange Ventures. So the first of one, I would like to invite Rob Petterman, Vice President Global Business Development at TMX Group, as well as our amazing CEOs here to join him. So Christian Millau, CEO at Equinox Gold, David Strang from Ero Copper. We have Jeremy Martin, CEO at Horizonte Minerals. We have Marie Ingsker, CEO at Lundin Mining, and Rodrigo Barbosa, CEO of Aura Minerals. Thank you very, very much for being here today. And we look forward to a great discussion. So Rob, the stage is yours.
Great. Thank you so much, Carolina. And I do have to start by thanking the BCCC for putting all of this together, bringing us together and creating this forum for dialogue. So, whether you're in Bello or Rio or Vancouver or Toronto, we're sorry not to see you here in Toronto this year, but we're all doing our best to keep everyone safe. So hopefully you'll bear with us in this digital format, and looking forward to a very productive conversation. We have an all-star cast of CEOs here to talk about the mining sector. And, just from a TSX perspective, we just believe that, PDAC is so important in terms of helping to move the global mining sector forward, and having this intersection of government and business coming together to, of course, balance things out between the social, economic, and finance factors that go into moving the mining sector forward. I'll make a few comments, and then I'm going to invite each of the panelists to introduce themselves, because I think they'll do a lot better job of introducing themselves than I'll be able to do. Last year, we did see a renewed interest in the mining sector. So something, that was maybe building for a while, we saw starting to come together last year. We saw about $7.5 billion raised on the TSX and the TSX Venture Exchange last year by mining issuers, and we're seeing a lot of interest in the category right now from investors who maybe haven't been looking at it in a long time. So put that together with the backdrop of everything happening right now around battery metals and other things like that. And I think there's, very interesting topics for conversations here. Just lastly mention that TSX and TSXV are home to about 36 companies that are doing business in Brazil, and that covers just under 100 properties. So in terms of kicking off the discussion here, we welcome questions as the event goes on, but what we're going to do is start off and ask each of the CEOs in turn to take 2 to 3 minutes and introduce themselves, a quick overview of their business and their focus on Brazil, and a comment or two on what investors can expect in 2021 from their company. So with that, I'll ask Marie to come off mute if she's on mute and introduce herself.
Great, thank you, and thanks for having me. Great event, and hopefully in person in the future. I guess starting off with me, I've been with Lundin Mining for quite a number of years. I joined in 2008. We've been working in Brazil since 2019. Lundin Mining is a diversified base metals mining company producing copper, zinc, gold, and nickel in concentrate form. Our operations, in addition to Brazil, we operate in Chile, Portugal, Sweden, and in the USA with our head office in Toronto, Canada. So globally, including employees and dedicated contractors, we have a total workforce about 10,000 people, and that includes over 1,800 in Brazil. Last year, we generated about 2 billion in revenue, and Chapada, which is our copper gold mine in Goiás State in Brazil, accounted for about 445 million of that total. So as I mentioned, we've been there since July 2019. We've been owner operator for about a year and a half now. And during that time, it's been an excellent operation for us. It performed very well, and in particular, adapting very quickly and operating through the global pandemic, which is a testament to the great team we have there, which is comprised of local Brazilian, and we don't have any expats, so our workforce is Brazilian. And 2021, we expect it to be a pretty exciting year for us. We know that we operated very well, and when we acquired it, we knew it was very well run, and we were impressed with the team. But one aspect that was very attractive to us was the exploration potential, and we saw a possibility to expand our production capacity, expecting to produce approximately 50,000 tons of copper and 75 to 80,000 tons of gold at the mine, but underway with a good exploration program, including 60,000 meters of drilling, and at the same time progressing and evaluating expansion work studies. So incorporating the results from our drilling, and we hope to complete these within the year. So lots of great stuff going on for us in Brazil.
Great, thanks so much. And I'd like to introduce our next panelist. So the CEO of Equinox Gold, Christian, please give a brief introduction of the company and what to expect in 2021, please.
Yeah, thanks, Rob. Great to be here again. Basically, Equinox Gold, we started there about 5 years ago in Brazil, interestingly, and we had one development asset, Aurizona, in the Maranhão state. And our plan was to put it back in production, and now we sit with 7 gold mines, with 4 of them actually in Brazil, and we're building one as well in Bahia State called Santa Luz. So Brazil's a big part of our business. It's about 3,000 of the 6,000 people that we have, and really performed really well in the last year, and we're looking forward to 2021 when we get that mine rebuilt in Bahia State. And 2021 will focus on Brazil with that growth, but also we've got the US, Mexico, and a new asset in Canada. So we're quite diversified at the moment. And in terms of number of assets, Brazil is our biggest region for sure, and largest number of people. And I think, as Marie said, it's been a challenging year in 2020 with COVID and managing businesses. But again, I think a similar vein, our workforce has done a great job in Brazil and managing it. And pleased to be seeing 2021 in the back of 2020 for sure.
Thanks so much. So I'll introduce our third panelist. So David Strang is the CEO of Ero Copper. David, please take the mic.
Thanks, Robert, and welcome to everybody, and thank you very much for hosting a great event. And as Marie said, much more better in person than it would be via Zoom, but it is what it is. Ero Copper is a dedicated Brazilian mining company. In 2016, we acquired a company by the name of Mineração Caraíba. Many people on the presentation will know that. It's one of the most well-established mining companies in Brazil, having an operating history of over 40 years now in terms of in Bahia state. Ero is comprised of 3 assets in Brazil. We have our core asset, which is the MCSA mining complex in northern Bahia, which mines primarily copper. 90% of our revenues come from copper production there, small byproduct credits of both silver and gold. But we're one of the lowest cost copper producers in the world at the moment in terms of our operations in Bahia, and very, very proud of the operation that we have there. In addition, we have NX Gold, our gold mining operation in Mato Grosso state. A smaller operation, probably will do about 36,000 to 40,000 ounces of gold this year, but at all-in sustaining costs around about $700 an ounce, makes us one of the lowest cost gold producers in the world. And then of course, our third asset is the Boa Esperança development project that we have in Pará state. We're in the process of updating the feasibility study at the moment, which we are looking to release to the market probably around mid-year. Very exciting project. And with respect to what we are hoping for 2021, it's interesting, when subsequent to our acquisition of Mineração Caraíba, we've been able to double production from just over 20,000 tons a year of copper to our current production rate of, or we're forecasting 42 to 45,000 tons this year. And I think we want to be in a position at the end of this year, in conjunction with potentially announcing the moving forward of the development of Boa, and also our extremely large exploration program, that we can show the marketplace a pathway to doubling our production again over the course of the next 3 to 4 years at first quartile operating costs. So very dynamic, very exciting time for us at the moment, and looking forward to the presentation. So thank you.
So our next panelist, introduce Jeremy Martin from Horizonte Minerals. Jeremy, please take the mic.
Robert, good evening, and it's a pleasure to be here. So I'm the CEO of Horizonte. I'm obviously at the slightly different end of the spectrum to my peer companies. We're a development company. We're listed in London and on the TSX. We've been active in Brazil for 10 years. I actually set the company up. We made a grassroots discovery, which we've taken all the way through to being construction ready. We have 2 tier 1 nickel assets, the Araguaia ferronickel project and the Vermelho nickel cobalt project. They're both in the Pará state. Vermelho is right in the heart of Carajás, and Araguaia is about 180 kilometers south. We are moving through an exciting phase. We've taken Araguaia through from discovery, pre-feasibility, feasibility, and we're now in the final stages of closing out construction finance. We've been sort of, as I say, a big focus of what we're doing is driven around the infrastructure that's in place in the state. We've got a very well-skilled pool of talent. And I think, look, it's an exciting time for the business in terms of 2021. Key milestones will be closing out the construction financing at the end of H1. That's broadly a $480 million finance package. We aim to be starting construction in H2. And then we aim to be producing first nickel from Araguaia in late 23. And in parallel, we're going to fast track Vermelho through feasibility study and be construction ready. So it's a very busy time, and yeah, exciting. So thank you.
Great, thanks a lot. And for our final panelist, Rodrigo, I'm not sure if you're between Toronto and Brazil right now and in Miami, kind of bringing us all together around the world, but Rodrigo, please take the mic and introduce yourself and Aura Minerals.
Thank you very much, Robert, and Carolina, for all the organization of this and everyone that is watching us here. very honored to be here, and also as a Brazilian representing also Brazil in the panel. We've been working in Aura to get the growth back in the company, working hard in building three strong pillars in order to grow, rebuilding the strategy and assets, rebuilding the balance sheet, and the team and the culture under which we want to develop these assets. Since then, we've been able to grow from 120,000 ounces last year, a little over 200,000 ounces, but still a lot of projects coming in or expansions coming into production. This year, we should be 250, 290,000 ounces of production. Next year, above 300, and we aim to achieve over 400,000 ounces by 2024. And most of this growth will come from Brazil. Today, we produce 65,000 ounces per year in Brazil. We are expanding production in EPP. We should be reaching 100,000 next year. We just announced Almas construction that was approved by the board, and we should initiate this construction in the upcoming month. And we'll take a year and a half to start production, which will be by mid next year, called Almas. And then we also have Matupá project in the state of Mato Grosso that we are now working on the feasibility study in order to publish by the end of the year and start the construction early next year. So altogether, the project in Brazil with the expansion and greenfield will come from 70,000 ounces as of today to over 200,000 ounces of production by 2024 when we develop the greenfield projects. 2/3 of our capital is moving to Brazil in terms of expansion. We are glad to see the country also opening also for investors, which we can talk later also, because Brazilian investors are looking for alternatives to invest, and gold mining and mining in general can get more traction and attention from them. Thank you very much.
Great, thanks. And I think if you take this as a bit of a snapshot of the mining sector in Brazil, great leadership and so much going on across these different projects that I think it really speaks well to what is happening right now. I'm going to jump into some questions that we have for the panelists, and again, I'll take a look at the Q&A as we're going through. But Marie, we're going to start with you, and in your business, you're allocating capital across multiple jurisdictions, and would love to get your thoughts on what you see with Brazil, how you think investors react and think about Brazil right now, and also wonder if that's different than the reality. So please take the mic.
Sure. And yeah, we just did 3 days of one-on-one meetings with investors at a conference where we spent a lot of time talking about capital allocation and different jurisdictions. And I believe many investors would view the mining sector in Brazil positively on the whole, and in particular, when we talk about, mineral potential, obviously, but also rule of law, property rights. There's a robust banking system, financial sector. And generally, there is a regulatory framework there with environmental approvals and other permitting systems that would allow you to get done what you need to get done. At the same time, I would think there's a continuing and potentially increasing concern over security in some locations, opposition to mining, perceived corruption, and the taxation regime is always a question. When we talk about Brazil with investors, they always ask about taxation. I don't think any of those would be a surprise to anyone. Of course, the administrative burden to comply with the tax codes is well known. It's certainly the most complex and burdensome of the countries where we operate, and we spend a lot of time on it. I understand there's potential reforms in process and proposals to simplify that structure. So, it's an aspect of doing business in Brazil that we were certainly aware of, and we focused on quite a bit during our due diligence prior to our acquisition of Chapada Mine. But, if there are changes to simplify that and reduce the administrative burden and cost of doing business, then we would definitely welcome that. Also on the corruption side, I know there are laws, regulations, penalties to combat corruption, but the effectiveness and consistency of the application sometimes can be called into question, and particularly in the smaller municipal level rather than at the national level. But with anti-corruption legislation signed into law in late 2019, again, we were certainly aware of the perception and focused on that during our due diligence. We increased staffing in our internal audit, hired dedicated resources in Brazil to ensure monitoring and explicit training on code of conduct, ethical values, anti-corruption was held with employees so they know our expectations. And that's just part of what you have to do in operating, making sure you educate the workforce on the rights of whistleblowers and how they can report improper activity. So some other investor concerns heard at times are on domestic productivity, possibly being slow and poor existing infrastructure. I would say for this is where the perception versus our reality is not aligned. As I mentioned previously, our team is comprised entirely of Brazilian nationals, and many are from the local municipalities around the operation. And I would say we have an excellent, energetic, engaged, productive workforce. And so we've been very pleased there. And we have the ability to find technical skills within the country, with people willing to develop the skill sets for our industry, and lots of great potential there. So, that's where I would say we have to educate people on infrastructure and the workforce. That's essentially where we have a bit of a disconnect. But in general, I think some of the challenges are well known, and also the benefits are also well known. So
great. Well, it's sometimes harder to have these conversations flow online, but as we go through these questions, just open it up if any of our other panelists have some thoughts on that particular topic. I think that was obviously a very good job of outlining some of the traditional things that investors would think about in relation to Brazil. So are there just pause for a second and see if any of our panelists have a couple key thoughts to add.
I can certainly add. I mean, I've been fortunate enough to work all over South America, and even anywhere in the world. The mining industry has its unique set of circumstances and issues anywhere in the world. And so when you look at it, or how investors look at Brazil, I can only speak for our own company, but when you have three of the largest institutional investors, Fidelity, T. Rowe Price, and BlackRock, own 34% of your company, I think that's somewhat telling with regards to how the institutional investors feel with regards to jurisdictional risk. There's always something that we can talk about each individual country with regards to their issues, and there are issues everywhere. We can look at the United States and permitting there. We can look at Canada and permitting in province by province basis. We can look at Brazil and certain things, but on an overall basis, as Marie rightly pointed out, we personally, like Marie's team down in Brazil, have a very strong Brazilian operating team in the country. Like Lundin, we do not have a Western or North American or European presence in Brazil. We have a great operating team down there. And like anywhere else in the world, Brazil does have its issues, but we have to manage our way through them just like everywhere else. We always want improvement in terms of each individual things. We as senior managers of all sorts of companies love the opportunity to make things go smoothly for us. But if it was easy, everybody would be doing it, right? And so I look at it from the perspective, yes, there are things that can be improved. Are we getting support from the federal and state government? We certainly see that in the places that we are. Could it be better? Always. I think that's part and parcel of anywhere we operate in the world.
Christian, it looked like you maybe had a couple.
I was just going to add to that a little bit. I would echo most of those sentiments. And one thing that I've really noticed since 2016 is a gradual improvement across the board in Brazil and investor sentiment has improved for sure. And we're in the 4 jurisdictions, and probably I'd say Brazil's been on the upswing and improving, and slightly improving its regulatory environment and certain operational matters. But then some of the other jurisdictions we operate in, I'd say, kind of been declining in terms of investment attractiveness. And kudos to Brazil for actually turning that corner. And I think from 2016 onwards, it's actually been a nice little improvement. It's been great.
Great. So, maybe on that topic, question for David. So David, Eero completed its IPO in 2017. Just on this theme of sort of directionally how things are going, talk about what the changes are right now that you've seen from 2017 to right now around investors and thinking about Brazil.
Well, as I said, I can only speak for ourselves with regards to the investors who invest with us. And we're very proud to be able to say that for a company of our size to have the institutional support that we have from Fidelity, BlackRock, T. Rowe Price, etc., taking those larger investor positions in us is a testament not only to our company, but also a strong view with regards to their feeling towards Brazil. I think, and as Christian said, since we have been operating in the country, we have seen continued interest and attempts by government to be helpful, to work towards trying to improve the bureaucratic process that are in place. And certainly work has been done at A&M in that, work towards the new auction process. But we have actually found, particularly with regards to our operations, and frankly, we're trying to move at rocket speed with regards to the development of new assets, things we're doing in our district with regards to our exploration programs. We've found both state, environmental and state A&M representatives being actually quite helpful in trying to find solutions to issues that are cropping up for them with regards to the needs that we need. And it's always, from my perspective, advantageous when you have that kind of symbiotic relationship with government trying to help you, because we're looking to continue to invest more and more money in country. I mean, we're averaging around about $100 million of investment into our operations in Brazil on an annualized basis right now. And so from that perspective, we have found government strong in terms of their attempts to help us. It's not easy, particularly in a country that has a history of being quite bureaucratic, but there are attempts with people that we're interacting with to try and find solutions and work with us, which is always extremely refreshing in any jurisdiction that you operate in the world.
Great. So question for Rodrigo, and changing gears a little bit. Aura did something that I haven't seen before, but you listed your company on the B3, so the Brazilian exchange, and did some work with Brazilian banks and investors, and would really love you to share your experiences with everyone here about the changing face of investors in Brazil and what the interest level was for the financing that you did.
Yeah, after the 3 years that we were totally focused doing homework at Aura, rebuilding the strategy, balance sheet, and culture, by the end of 19, we did think about re-IPO in the company, because by that time our daily trading volume was $5,000 per day, $10,000 per day. So there was a new story, new management, new balance sheet, new growth coming in. So we thought about either do a re-IPO in TSX. We thought about London, New York, but at the same time, we were significantly provoked by large Brazilian institutional investors, as well as major banks, because at the same time that we had a solid plan, solid cash flows and growth, Brazil was going through a significant change from a lot of capital financing government and on the fixed income and bonds, government bonds. And with the low interest rates going down below 10%, 8%, 6%, now it's below 5%. All this huge capital that was used to invest in government bonds, trying to find alternatives on the equity capital markets. And there was no single company that could offer anti-cyclical, a natural hedge, and a growing cash flow such as we could. So, and the combination of having a very strong story plus 30 years since I was born, I don't remember interest rates in Brazil being below 10%. So that's explain how we were used to invest in all high yields, 15, 20%, and very difficult to compete with government in terms of attracting capital. But once it triggered below 10, 6, 5%, all these very deep pockets trying to find opportunity in the equity. And Aura, we could offer this anti-cyclical growing story. It was not easy. It was also in the middle of the pandemic that we had to halt the IPO for a while. Then we resumed it back in June. The Brazilians do know very much about mining, but mostly about the Vale iron ore, which is huge capex, long paybacks, infrastructure, very different business from what we do in the gold side. So there was a lot of education. Also, the iron ore investors are used to 50, 60, 70 years life of mine, right? So when you switch the gears to gold, it's a different mindset, lower life of mine, lower capex, and then you have to work very well on the reserves and resources. So teaching them all the new angles, how to see gold mine took a while. Brazilian investors are very diligently, they go in the details, they make the right questions. It just took a while, but after 2 or 3 months of investors education, they learned very fast, so that we could attract major of the institutional investors in Brazil in the first glance. We did the IPO under the pandemic, so we focus on institutional, and the rule that was only that the shares could be traded only by institutional investors, not the retail as a whole. But right after, all the retail, all the agency was provoking us also, because there were huge interest from the retail investors to also invest in gold mines. So 3 months later, we did a follow-on, and then we did through the scrutiny of the regulator in order to allow the retail investors also to trade their shares. We are first gold mine listed in Brazil. I would provoke anyone that's here with me in the panel also listening to us. There is a significant amount of capital and investors that wants to invest in mining and want to invest in gold. We don't want to be the sole company listed in Brazil. I invited everyone also to consider dual listing. Brazil, it's a very strong producer in mining, and the Brazilians want also to benefit from the growth that the country can provide everywhere in other companies that's listed in TSX or London.
Great. So thanks for that, Rodrigo. Question now for Jeremy. We're seeing a lot of interest in things that will power electric vehicles going forward, and would love to talk. Have you talk a little bit about how ESG is shaping your mining operations.
Yeah, absolutely. I think obviously ESG is in the forefront of everybody's sort of minds at the moment. I think it's important to highlight that obviously nickel is more of an energy transition metal. It's not just targeted in the EV battery market. Obviously, the main driver today is stainless steel. And stainless steel is used in most renewable technologies. It's also used in water, anything that needs a sterile environment. So no, look, the ESG driver is key. I think one of the things that we're seeing, we're currently negotiating offtakes for Araguaia. We've got 4 major groups active in that process. And there's a significant focus on CO2 per ton of product. So what is your CO2? How can you drive that number down? And I think what's very interesting and positive from a Brazilian point of view, obviously we're in the Pará state. All of our power is hydroelectric, which plays very well across that thematic, driving that number down. I think, look, obviously Indonesia is the big producer at the moment. Their numbers for CO2 per ton of product are sort of 80, 90, 100 tons. And you look at the Brazilian examples, Anglo-American, etc., they're down at sort of 20 and driving that number down. So I think that's a big factor that we're seeing. I think obviously on the community side, we've been active, as I said, for 10 years in the region. We've grown up alongside our communities. Although we are close to Carajás, Araguaia is 180 kilometers south, the landscape changes very quickly. Our local town, Conceição do Araguaia, is 45,000 people, but the average wage is $2.50 a day in the rural communities. So it's been listening to those communities, understanding what they want. We've got a number of active social programs across a different raft of activities from agriculture. Obviously, it's a predominantly male-dominated environment, so we've got a number of programs for females, empowering females. So yeah, I think, look, it's key. And the other thing is obviously there's been stigma with cobalt in the EV battery space, predominantly out of the DRC with child labor, slavery conditions. So that's a key thing that we can bring into this product from Brazil, can obviously have a clean stamp on that side. So yeah, look, it's basically inbuilt in everything we're doing, and I think it's going to be key going forwards.
Thanks. So moving around the panel, Christian, our first question for you. You're in again, doing business across a number of jurisdictions, US, Mexico, Brazil. Love your thoughts on how you think about Brazil relative to the other jurisdictions you're doing business in, strengths and opportunities and challenges that you see.
Yeah, sure. I mean, I think we touched on a few of these points, but we're certainly seeing, a very skilled workforce, as the others have said on the panel. It's pretty easy to get skilled labor and very professional, trained and experienced people across the country. And again, when we came in a few years ago, I think after iron ore had collapsed and World Cups were done and that kind of thing, there was actually a lot of people looking for contracts and work, and it was a really good environment. And I think it's kept that momentum. The other advantage at the moment, and it can't be totally ignored, is obviously the currency has been fairly weak, and it does make for lower costs than I think you would have anticipated quite often at the beginning of the year. So it's been a real advantage for us the last couple of years in terms of investing, and as well as just our ongoing operating costs. I think the positive reforms that we've seen, again, contrast other regions, which I think are going the opposite direction. We're seeing labor laws, contracting laws, we're seeing just the regulatory environment, all improve, and maybe in minor and small ways, but it all helps out. And the tax regime, it is complex and bureaucratic, etc. But the actual rates are quite reasonable versus some of the other regions that certainly we're involved in. So, all in all, I think it sort of added up to a much more positive sentiment. And I think, as David's saying, from our perspective, we get a lot less questions about Brazil now with the political risk or the jurisdictional risk than we used to. And that's probably the number one point that sticks out in my mind, and it's been really good.
Great. So I'm going to try to bring some of the questions forward that have been put to us by the audience. So we address that. I think, most powerful to address the things that are on people's mind. But one of the questions, and, I'll put this out to all of the panelists to jump in on, the intensity of COVID is different region to region, and there are ebbs and flows to that. But, there's a few questions about how has COVID impacted Brazilian mining, and has the intensity of it in Brazil affected your activities maybe in Brazil more than you would expect? So if someone would like to take that question on, that would be great.
I'm happy to start. I can only speak from our experience. We had a record profits year last year. And I think the one benefit, if we had, in terms of Brazil, was Brazil had about 6 weeks before COVID hit versus the rest of the world. And as a corporation, we were fortunate enough to be able to have that time to put in planning that allowed us to, at best, manage COVID. Because I don't think you could ever say that COVID's not going to have an impact on your workforce, but certainly manage it from starting off with bringing in, being fortunate enough to acquire antigen testing kits at the beginning. Social distancing. We sent all of our workforce over the age of 55 home, and they've been working from home since the start of COVID, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So, from a planning perspective, as an organization, we have 3,000 direct and indirect employees, and we've had, according to our testing mechanisms, 300 positive tests. But the operation has been able to operate and manage. I'm proud to say, as an organization, we're now even able to do a PCR turnaround test time in 8 hours. So where COVID has impacted us, and I'm sure my fellow CEOs have seen the same thing, is the ability for us to travel from North America down to South America and visit the operations and spend time with our teams down there. But I also think it's a credit to the teams in country that they have been able to, and I'm sure my colleagues will say the same thing, being able to operate independently, to be able to continue to make their operations. Certainly that's the way it's been able to be done for us. So, I think it's a testament to Brazil, and it's been mentioned, our Brazilian colleagues and the workforce there being able to operate in that way. But certainly I think longer term strategically wise, the inability to travel, I think has a greater impact in terms of our company than anything else, to be able to be down there and work out long-term strategic plans. But interesting to hear what my fellow CEOs have got to say about that.
Yeah, I think, look, again, perhaps a view from a non-producer, and obviously we're at the final phase of, so we've been running value engineering for the last 8 or 9 months with working with SNC out of Belo in our office. And obviously typically engineering is usually teams working together. It's a collaborative process. And obviously that was stopped fairly sharply, everybody working from home. So I think that we have found initially during that process, it was challenging, the whole integrated engineering piece. But as David said, the ability to adapt and work through that, we found that through the last 3 to 4 months of that process, it was operating as if people were in the offices together. So I think, as you say, people have found a very good way to adapt, and you're still getting the results, but definitely that lack of international travel is still playing heavily on developments going forwards.
Yeah, Brazil has a big population, big size in terms of land as well. If you are aside of the big cities, you won't see high density. You won't see people depending on public transportation as much as they are in the big cities. So there was a lot of misinformation from government, a lot of confusion in the beginning, and companies that could be more proactive, approaching the communities around and teaching them more about the importance of social distance, the use of masks and so on, could have good impact over the cities and slow down the spread. The smaller cities of 15, 20,000, which probably is the ones that all of us operate here, 30,000 inhabitants. When you have a company that can proactively teach them and giving more information and clarify about situation, you can have a good impact, avoiding the spread, or at least reducing the spread, right? So in our operations, we were not significantly impacted by the COVID. We also implemented all the procedures that we learned from other countries. However, at this time, it seems that the situation is deteriorating rapidly in terms of COVID. We will face weeks of deterioration, but different from the beginning, we are way more prepared to face that. Where the information is available, the tests are available, the equipments are available. So it's just now apply the best that we can and help the communities the most we can in order to go through the next 2, 3, or 4 weeks when we will see a deterioration in the situation. But then probably we'll recover.
I was just going to add a quick comment. I mean, I'd echo almost all those points, but we've seen into 4 different states we operate in quite different approaches, both locally at the state level and even federally, and quite often contradictory approaches. And that's been one of the hardest things to deal with is, you know, which group has almost jurisdiction in a sense of decrees to shut things down or keep things operating. And, you know, it's confusing to the workforce as well. And I think we've gone through the most difficult time of that, and that was in the first 6 months. And I think things have stabilized. At least in terms of the approach, but you know, otherwise, you know, health and safety is one of the key things in the mining industry. So I do believe mines adapt fairly well, unfortunately, to these difficult circumstances. But it's been a reasonable approach, and we've even been approached just recently about buying vaccine in country for all our employees, which obviously is a whole different ethical and medical thing that is a whole other rabbit hole. But you know, it's probably maybe even ahead of where Canada is at this stage in terms of vaccine approach.
All right. There's also some questions coming in, you know, on the subject of ESG, and you know, feels like we can't do mining events anymore without talking about ESG. It's part, you know, part of what everyone does every day. You know, looking for some thoughts from the panelists. There's a few different questions coming in, but just in general, you know, what do you think about when you think about ESG in Brazil? Is the perspective in Brazil any different than you find in other regions? So would love to get some thoughts about the importance of ESG in terms of doing business in Brazil right now.
I'll wade in on that one if you'd like. I think in Brazil, definitely when people think about ESG, they start with tailings. You know, and I get asked a lot of questions about tailings in Brazil, and specifically whether the regulations are more onerous than in other places. And I think overall the answer is no. If you're following international best practice, you're doing the same things. It's just the amount of external sign off and scrutiny and reporting that you would have to do is more than we would see in other jurisdictions. You know, we've made a commitment to comply with the new international standard on tailings management within the guidelines that were set out by ICMM. So I don't see that it's there's any more onerous procedures and practices you would have to do. And then after tailings, it just depends on who you're talking to and what their particular objective is. Because when you talk about ESG, it's a very, very broad range. And I often get asked, what's the single most important thing? And the answer is, it depends on who you're talking to and what's important to them. So I think understanding your stakeholders, understanding what's important to them, where are you aligned, where are you not aligned, what are your common objectives? And, you know, that's the most important part. So whereas it might be tailings in Brazil, where we are in Chile, it might be dust. In Michigan, it's water. So it just depends on your jurisdiction and what is important to your stakeholders as to where your focus is in that area. So it's definitely something that we put an awful lot of work in. At Lundin Mining, we've been doing a very comprehensive sustainability report really for about 10 years now. Because of our location in Europe and with a lot of Nordic pension funds, you know, Swedish, Norwegian pension funds invested in us, you know, they started asking questions 10 years ago that North American investors are asking now. So I feel like we're a bit ahead of the curve in terms of responding to that. But again, it just depends on the various stakeholders and what they're interested in.
Anyone else have some thoughts they want to share around ESG in Brazil versus other jurisdictions?
Well, not necessarily ESG in Brazil. It's funny, just prior to coming on here, I was having a coffee with one of my directors, the CEO of another mining company, and we were talking about ESG. And I think as an industry, and I can't speak for everybody, but in general, it was interesting. We were talking about he had attended some a conference or a work group with a more broader group of companies, and he was astonished at how further back they were in terms of their understanding of the broader framework of ESG and how it's sitting in the world, and how you need to comply. And I think we're finding the biggest single issue that we're having right now is translating the ESG programs and what we're doing on a practical basis into a compliance related metric that can be measured around the world. At the moment, ESG is such a buzzword that you have a number of different groups with various different metrics trying to be the go-to for all the fund managers around the world to comply with. And whether it's ISS or whether it's Glass Lewis or whether it's one of these other groups, Church of England, et cetera, they all have different metrics. And it's a bit of a ping pong ball type scenario right now in terms of putting your information into a tick the box type environment. And so I think it's going to be really interesting over the next 3 to 4 years. I can't wait for the more focused audit function that's going to start emerging for the industry that brings a certain set of rules and how we get measured for stakeholders, because I think, I can't speak for everybody else, I think the mining industry, we're a difficult industry in terms of what we do in terms of the environment, but with respect to an industry on an overall basis with regards to senior management, I think we're quite thoughtful with regards to environmental issues and quite thoughtful with regards to our community issues in where we operate, particularly where we are in the very remote part of Northern Bahia. We are the economic engine. We provide all the taxation in Northern Bahia. We actually provide 75,000 people with their water supply from our water pipeline. And so, we are integrated with our communities, and we are, as our stakeholders, are incredibly important because of where we sit within their lives. And it's taken that information and being able to translate it, as I said, with regards to this more compliance, right, tick the box type thing that we're seeing right now. So it's a very, very muddied world out there in terms of trying to translate what you're doing into something that ISS or Glass Lewis can turn around and say, thank you very much, you've ticked our box.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And because, we've been reporting for 10 years on this, and we follow the Global Reporting Initiative standards. So we've aligned all of our processes and systems to align with Global Reporting Initiative, so GRI reporting, and also carbon disclosure projects that we've been participating in. And then all of a sudden, all of the fund managers come and they say, well, no, we like SASB, so we want you to use SASB. And they don't seem to understand that it's not just, okay, we'll just put it in another box. It's like completely rearranging your systems of reporting and gathering information. It's almost like you take out SAP and put in Oracle or whatever. It's not an easy process, and it takes a lot of time, effort, money, and administrative time in order to do that. And it's not logical to have two systems. So, we keep telling the GRI and the SASB people, like, get together and work it out, because we're not doing two forms of reporting. It just, there's an administrative burden there that doesn't make sense. So yeah, I would echo that.
I would complement what David was also starting to talk is, if on one hand we are in the difficult industry because we are dealing with the environment in our operations, we deal with the community in operations. In other hand, probably we are in the industry that has the most impact that any other industry can have on ESG. We are close to very far cities, far from federal government, poor areas with low infrastructure. So we can definitely have a very strong impact. Actually, probably mining is already doing this for the last 10, 15 years. And then with the ESG agenda, this will move forward way faster, but the impact that mining industries, when they operate correctly, has towards the communities where they operate, and the environment is huge. It's huge. It's a significant transformation that the whole industry can have in the areas that they do operate. In the countries they also operate in. The mining industry can change countries, can change communities. And the ESG will now open the eyes of everyone what we can do to provide and share the value that we are building from the operations together with the whole community. So it will be interesting to see next 5 and 10 years the importance of mining on developing communities and countries.
Great. So sensitive to the fact we did start a little bit late, but that we're getting close to running out of time. What I would like to do in closing is give a final comment to each of our panelists, make sure they get a chance to share anything that they think is important to this dialogue that hasn't been brought up already. I think the other thing I would ask is maybe for them to share an example of the impact that their company has had on Brazil. I think in the mining sector, we don't do a good enough job about speaking about what those impacts are, the economic and other impacts that happen in communities. So would love to hear something about that as well. And so Rodrigo, maybe we'll start with you and ask you for your sort of closing comments and a thought about the impact that you've had on the communities you're working on in Brazil.
Thank you. The impact on the communities is as important also, and I would highlight what we were talking in the beginning, and because we can definitely develop a way more mining industry in Brazil, starting from investors. We did the IPO, and that's producing assets with a growth story is appealing. We did that, we checked the box. We need more companies bringing in their assets to Brazil, because that will open a way to further down the road, when the investors are more used to the risk of mining, to go more to the developing side, more the geological risk, because that's what will drive more projects in Brazil from the paper toward construction. And with all this, and mixing a little bit with the ESG agenda, which is very important, because it's such a huge potential that Brazil has on mining. If we can develop more the projects at the early stage, bringing in capital, and to the sites or to the communities, that it's a new money, it's a responsible company that will be in that area, giving more employees, giving right instructions under a very ethical behavior, taking care of the environment, so on. So that's a huge opportunity for all of us on the mining industries, starting from equity capital markets to push more the industry to develop those projects that has been on paper for 20 and 30 years. And with more capital and more knowledge, with all of us, we can definitely push all those projects toward construction, which will help the country to develop as a whole.
Great, thanks, Rodrigo. Jeremy, maybe I'll come to you next for closing comments.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the panel has covered a lot of good ground tonight, and I think we're in quite an interesting position here. We're about to start construction of a $500 million project. It's got a plus 30-year mine life. So I think, echoing what Rodrigo said, we've got a fantastic opportunity here to build a showcase operation, being able to effectively implement best-in-class practices, as well as building in the whole ESG thematic across all levels of the operation. So I think touching on that inflow of capital, I mean, our financing is going to be split between North America, Europe, and Brazil. We've got active Brazil banks. And I think there is definitely interest, there is appetite. I think all the panelists have highlighted that actually Brazil is a very favorable jurisdiction. And I think that's, we're seeing that in the level of interest that we're getting. So no, it is an exciting time, I think, for Brazil. And mining's got a lot to add in terms of value going forwards. So thank you very much.
Great. So David, over to you for your final thoughts and comments.
Great, thank you. Well, I think what people should take away from this conversation today is companies like Lundin Mining, companies like Equinox, companies like ourselves and Aura and Horizonte are all, there's a one theme, and that is all about investing in the country. You know, prior to us investing and doing that and talking to investors around the world when we were raising our first round of funding, people were asking us, well, how do you think you can do better than a lot of your colleagues who have sort of broken their picks in terms of investing in Brazil? And I think it's clear with the successes that Ero's had, the successes that Equinox is having, Lundin making its investment in the country, and the rest of the panelists, and more capital being invested, just will give greater and greater certainty with other companies looking at the industry and my fellow CEOs and companies making capital contributions in Brazil and reinvesting in Brazil and growing our assets in Brazil, that Brazil is very much a country open for business for the mining industry, and that it is a stable jurisdiction. There's always been issues bureaucracy-wise, but it is a place that you are able to operate successfully. And the mere fact that we're all interested in growing our assets in country should come as a comfort to people in Brazil, that we all feel that Brazil is open for business, and certainly as an example to the rest of the mining industry that Brazil should be looked at closer, and that when you're looking to allocate capital, Brazil is a place that should be high on the agenda. Great, some of the best people I've ever worked with in my career are my colleagues in Brazil. Yes, the permitting process is bureaucratic, but if you build it into your process in terms of what you're looking to do in country, you will find support from government, both locally and federally, with regards to helping you move your projects forwards. We've had a great experience, and I'm really excited about the future for our company in Brazil, because we're going to continue to invest and build our assets in country. So thank you.
Thanks, David. Christian, your final thoughts for today.
Yeah, I'd echo exactly what David's saying. I mean, I think there's lots of positives there, but I was just going to give one little very specific story, actually. I think miners should be more proud of what they do and the impact they make, because usually it's actually quite positive, and we tend to clean up, hopefully, and leave behind a nice reclaimed site at the end of the day. But I remember my first or second trip to Brazil, into northern Maranhão, into a small town basically beside the mine, when the mine had gone into care and maintenance, and I met this woman who became one of our interpreters. And she basically came from the local town and village and region, but was a qualified engineer. And next time I came back, she was actually working in our processing team. And that's the kind of opportunities that we can provide, I think, into some of these regions and areas that we work. And I think the other really amazing point that really stood out to me in the early days too is the percentage of actually the workforce that are female as well. And it's really hard sometimes to convince women to, I think, get into this industry. And it's wonderful to see, you know, that level be so high in this country versus a lot of other places I've worked in the world. So just a little anecdote, but the big picture issues, I totally agree with David and others.
Great, thanks for that, Christian. And Marie, over to you for your final thoughts for today.
Sure, it's always hard going last when you're giving final thoughts, because you can just say what they said. You know, agree with everything. One of the things that we did very quickly after investing in Brazil was to arrange a trip and bring, 25 sell-side analysts and big institutional investors down to the site to see, the infrastructure, the operation, interact directly over a number of days with the management team and really understand why we invested there and what we did. And the feedback from that was universally positive, and people coming out and writing reports and publishing them saying, wow, it's much better than we anticipated. What a great team and a great operation. So I think, I would encourage more people to do that. Instead of just talking about how good it is to invest in Brazil, take your investors there and show them, because they universally come out with a much better perception than they had going in. And so I think it's really important. And also with your teams, for us, you know, to hopefully once this pandemic is over, for us to be able to bring people from our other locations to Brazil and share the very good things that are happening there. You know, that's something that we've been doing and we hope to continue to do. So, you know, take the benefits of the good things happening. And of course, everybody knows, and we started off the conversation about the things that are challenging that we'll have to work on and, you know, just continue to do better. But I think there's a lot of positives. And as someone mentioned earlier, Brazil is on an upward trajectory here in terms of being a desirable mining jurisdiction. And we can keep that going as if we demonstrate our success.
Right. So I think with that, you know, I really want to thank our panelists. I've enjoyed the conversation from, you know, navigating COVID over the past year to your enthusiasm for your projects and the people in Brazil. You know, we're excited about the opportunity to keep building this connection between Canada and Brazil, which is already very strong. But we look forward to continue to build that with the BCCC, and you know, very thankful to all these companies for the work they've done, and want to personally thank each of you for taking your time to join this panel today. And I wish there were a way to generate some applause, but in this virtual world, you'll just have to accept this thank you, and I will pass things back to Carolina to take us through to the next phase.
Wow, thank you so much, Rob. What an inspiring panel. Thank you everyone for being here today. I agree with Rob. I wish we had the TMX clapping system embedded in this program as well. We would like to thank you all for being here. We will go before I announce our next panel, before we go for a quick commercial, I would just like to share a quick institutional videos from one of our institutional sponsors and members, so Lundin Mining. Please, guys, you can have a quick look of the Chapada project with you.
Located at Alto Horizonte Municipality in Goiás State, Chapada is an open-pit copper gold mine. It is a conventional truck and excavator mine operation. The processing facility has a current capacity of 24 million tons per year. In 2019, it becomes the first Brazilian mine owned and operated by Lundin Mining. Lundin Mining, responsible mining.
Welcome back. We are now back with our next panel. TSX Ventures and Private Companies, Trends and Challenges for the Global Mining Industry. So the panel will be moderated by our longtime friend, Guillaume Legar, Head South America at the Toronto Stock Exchange and Toronto Stock Exchange Ventures. And I would like to welcome our speakers here today as well. Calvin Gardner, CEO at Sigma Lithium Resources. Mike Mutchler, President and CEO of Marilo Gold. We have Gilbert Clark, Executive Chairman at Meridian Mining. We have Miles Thompson at Lara Exploration. So, sirs, like the mic, Guillaume, I'll pass the mic to you. Thank you so much, everyone, for being here today, and looking forward to this great discussion.
Thank you very much, Carolina. Thanks for the invitation. I'm quite impressed with the platform also. I think it's a great way for us to connect this year at PDAC, but hopefully it's the last time we connect this way, but for this year it will be quite productive. So it is an interesting opportunity to discuss TSX Venture Exchange companies with these CEOs, experienced CEOs today. Today I would like to, well, we've already introduced our four panelists: Calvin Gardner, CEO at Sigma Lithium Resources, Mike Mutchler, CEO at Amarillo Gold, Gilbert Clark, CEO at Meridian Mining, and Miles Thompson, CEO at Lara Exploration. So our goal today with the panel is to have a meaningful conversation on key changes on the Brazilian mining sector that are affecting the business for explorers and producers, and discuss also how Brazil can evolve its mining sector and continue to compete for global capital. So we have an hour to do this. It is an interesting time, as I mentioned, to look at Brazil and the mining sector. There were some positive changes in the Brazil mining sector recently, and I've heard the previous panel, and it's quite positive overall, the comments that we hear. And I want to provide some insight also. I know Robert did mention some of the numbers for the TSX and the TSX Venture, but it's important to mention that Latin America is the most important mining sector for the TMX, the TSX and the TSX Venture. It represents 25% of all mining issuers on TSX and TSXV. And as the December 31st, there were 410 mining companies in LATAM listed on TSX and TSXV with 1,061 properties. So in terms of the number of properties for Brazil, there's currently 36 TSX, TSXV companies with 99 mining properties. But what we saw in 2020 as a very interesting trend is that, well, there was a momentum overall for mining, but there was a clear momentum for the TSX Venture. Rob did mention the 7.5 billion capital raised, equity capital raised. Of this amount, 4.1 billion was raised for the TSX Venture and 3.4 on the TSX, and 2.9 billion overall was raised for projects in LATAM. So that's an important number to remember. And in terms of the number of financing also on the TSX Venture, there were 1,467 financings on TSXV. So it is a very important number to consider for 2020, and we hope to see this trend going on in 2021 and beyond. And there were 57 new listings on the TSX and TSXV in 2020, and 10 of those new listings were in LATAM. And here again, the interesting fact is that these 57 new listings, 48 were on the TSX Venture. So it's very interesting to have this discussion today, in fact, because the 4 companies are TSXV issuers. And the format is really for each of the panelists, the speakers, to introduce themselves and the Brazil operations first, and then we'll go for a few questions. So we can start with Miles Thompson. Considering your schedule a bit ahead of us, Miles is currently in London, UK. So I'll give you a chance to speak first. And we thank you, by the way, for spending part of your evening with us. So go ahead, Miles, to introduce yourself and your company. Thank you.
Thank you, Guillaume. I'm obviously now humbled because Gilbert's 1 hour ahead of me even. So I feel less bad about that. Anyway, by way of introduction, I'm an exploration geologist. I've been working in Brazil for over 30 years now, not all of my time. But certainly I lived there for about 15 of those 30, and I've worked there for most of that time on something or another. Some Brazilian friends and I formed Lara Exploration in 2006. And in parallel, I also set up some companies in Eastern Europe, most notably Reservoir Minerals in 2011, where we made a world-class discovery at Čukaru in Serbia together with Freeport. And we're very proud winners of the Theo Lindsley Award here at the Prospectors and Developers Association of Canada in 2016. Lara is very much an exploration company. We're what's known in Canada as a prospect generator. So we will go out, acquire ground, do basic geological and exploration work, and then typically partner with somebody else to move it forward, be it joint ventures, partnerships, strategic alliances, and we will typically end up with a minority interest in a project and or a royalty. At the moment, most of what we're doing is spread either between Brazil or Peru. And once we get on to the questions, I'll comment a little bit about the mix and the priorities. In Brazil, we've made 3 copper discoveries. Some Liberdade near São Félix de Xingu in partnership with Codelco. Celesta near Curionópolis, also in Pará, in partnership with private and Brazilian and Canadian investors. And most recently at Planalto, a discovery we have near Canão dos Carajás, which is now in partnership with Capstone Mining. We've taken a long-term approach to operations and investments in Brazil, and are very proud of our achievements to date, and look forward to further success in the years ahead. Thank you.
Thank you, Gilbert. Since you're also ahead of us in terms of schedule, please introduce yourself and your company.
Thank you. My name is Gilbert Clark. I'm the Executive Chairman of Meridian Mining. I'm a 25-year veteran in the mining industry, from operations, mergers and acquisitions through to private equity, which I've been doing for the last 12 years. I was brought into Meridian in 1988. Sorry, 2000. What am I saying? 2018 to do a corporate restructure. I guess I've listened to a few of the discussions today. We didn't find a problem in Brazil. We imported a problem to Brazil. So through management decisions. What I like about Brazil is that at every stage that I've worked at there, the people I've worked with, they've got the exact comparable skill sets to the guys I work with in the mines in Western Australia or the gentlemen and ladies in the Nordics. It's a place where I like to go to work. As we're going forward with Meridian, I think I don't see it as being challenges. I'm just seeing it being planned success. And I've got to put me on the spot here. Yeah, look, that's what I'm looking at. We're just looking at a planned success for Meridian, working with the government agencies to get things done. And now our team in Brazil is really being led by our CEO, Dr. Adrian MacArthur, but he's really supported by just a 100% Brazilian team. So although we're a Canadian issuer, a TSXV company, we're 99% populated by Brazilian professionals, and that's, I think, something that draws a lot of people to Brazil. Thanks.
Perfect. Thank you, Gilbert. We'll talk in more details about your Cabaçal Copper Gold project in a few seconds. So third, Mike, would you like to introduce yourself and your company, please?
Yes, thank you, Guillermo. I'm Mike Muchler. I'm CEO of Amarillo Gold Corporation. I've been working in Brazil for about 10 years. I was with Kinross Gold, project manager on a mill expansion at the Paracatu mine several years ago. Then I was chief operating officer with Largo Resources, building the Maracás vanadium mine, and now, of course, with Largo Resources. I'm sorry, with Amarillo Resources. I'm very comfortable working in Brazil. I think it's a very good jurisdiction, a safe jurisdiction, a good mining friendly country, and a good safe permitting regime. So very happy working in Brazil. We've got some very good Brazilians on our team as well. They're Brazilian experienced folks. David Lang recently joined our board. David was chief operating officer with Equinox on the Arizona restart. So he's been involved in building an operation in Brazil. Also joining our board is Antenor Silva, a very well-known Brazilian mining engineer, one of the co-founders of Yamana and chief operating officer of Yamana for several years. So very happy to have those people involved in our company. Arau Portugal is our country manager. He's a 40-year mining veteran, former co-country manager with Yamana, worked with Vale for several years before that. So good experienced team in Brazil, and very happy with the folks there. Amarillo Gold, we have 2 gold projects in Brazil. We have our main Mara Rosa or Poço development property in Goiás state, about a 4-hour drive from the federal capital of Brasilia. 1 million ounces of open pit resource there that we're getting ready to start construction on over the next few months. Second property in the south of Brazil, Lavras do Sur, Rio Grande do Sur state, an exploration property. We have 22 targets there on 22,000 hectares of exploration concessions. 500,000 ounces of resource on one of those targets, but still a tremendous amount of work to do in that part of Brazil.
Perfect. Thank you very much, Mike. And our last speaker will be Calvin Gardner. Please, Calvin, I think you're joining us from your company in Araçuaí. I was fortunate enough to visit the site a while ago, but I'm quite curious to see what's happening now. So,
well, Guillermo, thanks, and well, nice to be here, and pleasure to be part of the panel. So yes, I am. My name is Calvin Gardner. I've been in mining for more than 30 years. Most of the time, over 20 years with Anglo American. I ran the iron ore, steel, and vanadium operation of Anglo, and I've been living in Brazil since 2011. So very pleased to talk to you from site. We've been here. Well, I've been now living here basically since September on site as we're in pre-construction stage. So just quickly then on Sigma. So it's obviously with great delight that I can sit here and talk about that. So Sigma is really a high-grade, large lithium project, and really put Brazil on the lithium map in the world, as most people understand. We've been developing this project here now for the last six years, and now are currently, and I'm glad to say, in pre-construction phase. So we're busy putting our first deposit into construction, and that's the work we're doing. And it's not just the first deposit, it just happens to be the second highest grade lithium deposit in the world. I think interestingly about these deposits here in Brazil is the quality of them. This is a multi-deposit project with currently nine past producing lithium mines. And what is fairly unique is the very high grades, which allows one to be super competitive in this industry, in the lithium industry. And we happen to be the second lowest cost concentrate producers in the world. And when you can see in my background is the pilot plant where we actually produce material and send it to various customers. So just quickly, it's currently a 52 million ton resource. We expect to double that by the end of the year to 3.7 million tons of LCE, which makes us, I think, about the fifth largest lithium project in the world, and definitely the largest hard rock deposit in the Western Hemisphere. And then moving then to doubling the reserve by June to having over 23 million tons of reserves. I think it would be wrong for me not to say that we were born out of ESG and climate change. These ESG credentials are very important to us, and we'll probably discuss this a little later. But having auditable ESG credentials is critical to Sigma, and we're having independent audits to confirm really our credentials here in Brazil, and we're very proud of that. The situation with the plant, just quickly, is going to be a 220,000 ton plant. We're currently busy with the detailed engineering as well as the foundation drilling and testing. And it's interesting enough that the quality is so unique that we've pre-sold all the first phase production, is 220,000 tons of concentrate for the 6 years. So Guilherme, I was saying, you've known us for a while now, from really day one when we started there in Canada. It's really a coming of age for Sigma, moving from developer to producer, and it's great delight I'm able to talk with you guys here tonight on this panel. Thanks.
Great, thank you, Calvin. You mentioned ESG, and Rob did mention that we cannot have a mining event these days without talking about ESG. Obviously, Latin markets are competing for capital these days more than ever before. Investors are paying attention to the risk, opportunities in the region, political stability, ease of doing business in the country, social license to operate, permitting process. These are lots of things to be considered. We've seen Brazil making impressive improvements to its legal and regulatory framework over the past few years. And I think this is quite positive, what we heard from the previous panel as well. But in order to hear from this panel, let me start with you, Miles. Lara is developing a new copper discovery at Planato in the Carajás. What has been your experience permitting and operating the exploration program and technical studies in recent years, please?
Yeah, I mean, in a word, the experience has been good. I mean, as I said before, we've been exploring the Carajás for many years, and we've been involved with several projects there. But I think we're at something of a watershed in terms of getting things done in Brazil. Several of the previous panelists commented about the bureaucracy. It is frustrating on a good day. But I've in all the years I've worked in Brazil, I've never worked in an environment where you had regulatory authorities that were so proactive as they are today. So I think the creation of the ANM has reinvigorated the main regulator. It's more engaged, much more supportive than it was previously. I haven't had a huge amount of experience with the environmental side of things until we got into some of these late stage projects more recently. And it's really been a benefit that so many of the functions have been delegated to the state and the municipal level. So you're actually able to get to know your regulators and work with them. You can take in problems. They'll come around and talk to you rather than just send you something in the post. And that's really worked very well for us. And I think just the final point is the infrastructure. Again, something that people often comment on. I mean, we're in the Southern Carajás. There's high tension power lines powered by hydro. There are highways that are asphalted. There's Valley's train system. We sit between Parapebas and Canals Carajás, which are both basically valley towns. There's a lot of service providers, a lot of qualified people for every single function you can imagine. So the environment to do stuff, the level we do with the exploration side is very good, but also as you move forward and advance the project through permitting and into development, I think has not been as functional as it is today in a very long time. Certainly my experience.
Excellent. Thank you very much. And Calvin, from Sigma's perspective, you've probably witnessed or experienced some difficulties in the past couple of years. You've seen positive changes as well. How has this affected the growth of Sigma, and how do you see things today with the changes, the recent changes that have been made, and how you see the future based on that?
Yes, I sort of reiterate what Miles said. We've been working here essentially, from early 2012, but essentially developing it basically 6 years ago. But yes, we obviously see different regimes. I think that the ANM now is a breath of fresh air. I think it is now more reactive, there's no doubt. As I can say with the Environmental Agency, which I've also had a lot of experience in, where there is a genuine interest to try and find solutions to problems and come to agreements in the way forward. And things do move there. It was very difficult to get movement there before. So, for us here at Sigma, I've said it many occasions, it has been a complete breath of fresh air. This whole new regime behind the government in terms of environmental, in terms of legislation, and getting things done. And then obviously ESGs, or at the end of the day for us, we have to meet these requirements. And I think it's really important to say these are world requirements. So we get audited, by various people from overseas. Sigma was invited to the COP25 climate change as one of two companies to present on ESG and what has been happening here with what we're doing to minimize our carbon footprint on site. And there's a whole bunch of things I could talk about that, but I'm not going to. But coming back to change, there's definitely been a change. There's much more emphasis now on getting the projects done in a proper, sustainable ESG manner. And much of the money still comes from funds that are ESG linked, and many of our investors in Sigma are ESG funds. So this is critically important for us. And you really are seeing government support behind that. Sigma actually now, in fairness, Dalomi, has been classed as strategic to the state. And so, we sort of get other more senior people involved as well. I can't complain, literally can't complain about the support we're getting. I like to say, right, with this type of support, you have the wind in your sails and get on sailing, literally. So yes, been very good indeed. And I echo what Miles said.
Thank you, Calvin. And obviously on the ESG part, we know how active you have been in the community, around your community, especially around the COVID crisis. We will talk about this a bit later on to see exactly how you're coping with the crisis, but also the positive impact of Sigma in the community, which is amazing. My next question is for Mike. So Mike, you are currently advancing two important gold projects in the states of Goiás and Rio Grande do Sul. In the past, Brazil has been associated with a high level of jurisdictional risk. And so what has your experience been so far, and has the risk decreased? How can you comment on this, please?
Well, certainly our main development property in Goiás State. Goiás State is a good mining-friendly district. There are several operating mines in the area. We're located about 30 kilometers from the Lundin Chapada mine and roughly 100 kilometers from the AngloGold Crechas mine and the Equinox Pilar mine, and several other mines in the area. We're fortunate the state government is strongly in support of mining. The state governor, shortly after the pandemic hit last March and April, we held a meeting with him. He signed his protocol of intent to show his support for our project. He made a statement that he sees mining and construction as key to helping rebuild the economy of Goiás State following the pandemic. So we're very fortunate that the governor is strongly behind mining and mining projects in Goiás State. Our second project in the south of Brazil, Lavras do Sur in Rio Grande do Sur state, not quite as far along. It's a development stage property. Again, working on 22 targets over 22,000 hectares, but just starting to get to know the regulators there and starting to work with the state regulators. So just getting started there, but very well advanced in our Mara Rosa property in Goiás state.
Great, and you just received your license to install. What was the process like for Amarillo? How was it?
Yeah, as most of the folks may know, there's a 3-step permitting process in Brazil. The LP, which is the social and environmental license, we received that in 2016. Mara Rosa is a brownfield site. It was mined by Western Mining in the early 90s, so there's been a mine there in the past. The local community is 10 kilometers from the mine site. It's an agricultural community with no major industry there. They're very supportive of the project. So the LP, we received our environmental agency approval. We did our environmental baseline. We have environmental agency approval, but more importantly, we have the good, strong community support. They want to see the mine, the community wants to see the mine reopen and see those mining jobs come back into the community. We recently received our license to install. That was received in early February. That's about a little over a 1-year process from the time we applied for the license to install. Goiás State has recently streamlined their permitting process. They've combined in the past, there would have been separate LIs for each component of the project. And now that's combined under one main LI. Very good working with the regulators. The governor held another meeting in late January. He and his Minister of Environmental and Minister of Industry signified their support for our project and many other projects that they were working on.
Perfect. Thank you, Mike. Gilbert, your company is focusing on Brazil and with the Cabaçal copper gold project in the state of Mato Grosso. Tell us about your experience to deploy capital in a mining investment and working with the government agencies.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, look, I came into this project very much in the sort of the institutional mindset, which is, okay, to grow an asset, you've got to be able to raise money, then deploy that capital, and then make that capital work and grow your equities. It's bread and butter. And when I looked at this, I thought, if I am to deliver to our shareholders, we need to understand, and bring our experience from Rondônia and the relationship with the authorities there, where they said, okay, this is the timeline to do things. I said, okay, well, we spoke with our regulators in Mato Grosso, and they said, well, this is our timeline. So then we look at those timelines, say, okay, these are the deliverable timelines that we should present to our investors. So this is when we will start deploying capital. And, back in December when we spoke to the authorities, they said, well, this is our timeline. I said, fine, okay, that's our timeline. That's what we communicated. And almost to the day, we get our LOP from SEMA. So it very much, I've listened to a lot of people in other forums, and they discuss difficulty with administrators, and it's no different really in any other part of the world. You work to the time frame of the administrator because they have their processes. I've done a lot of auditing and investment reviews around the world, and whether it be in Rondônia or Mato Grosso, particularly where we're now focused in Mato Grosso, the ability for us to deploy our capital into our project, mobilize equipment, mobilize geophysics, mobilize drill teams, and so forth. That time frame that I'm experiencing, it's comparable to stuff you might get in Western Australia or South Australia, really dynamic mining investment destinations. So I'm quite comfortable. I'm really happy of how we've gone with the regulators. To be honest, I don't have the experience to interact with the regulators. So I give this to my Brazilian team, and they're led by Adrian. He's been there for 6 years. So rather than try and import a problem, I let my local team produce a solution in the time frame that's within the expectations of our investors. That's just a fundamental for the TSX. Deliver your expectations in line with what is deliverable.
Thank you, Gilbert. In the past few months, we've seen how mining jurisdictions adopted measures to mitigate the impact of COVID-19. Brazil has made adjustments and seems to have bounced back faster than some others, some other Latin peers. We know that the situation is quite difficult in Brazil right now, but some mining companies have been able to restart some operations more quickly. We can start with Calvin. Sigma is very involved in the community during the pandemic. Can you explain how Sigma adapted to the pandemic and how it sees the post-pandemic world?
Yes, well, first of all, to say, and so it's not all Sigma, right? The areas actually hasn't really been badly hit. We are quite remote here. And for example, in the first phase, I think we had a total for the whole year of only 90 or maybe 100 people that got COVID in this area, right? So we are quite remote, and it's not a place where people come and go. But I think we very quickly, first of all, mining was seen to be strategic, so it was an operation that kept going. But all companies really started to put in protocols. So we have quite strict protocols here at Sigma, as do others, not just Sigma. But, for people being tested on a regular basis, so the workforce here, we test on a monthly basis. Temperatures are tested on the whole workforce every day. And we keep the workforce in groups. So we try not to put too many people together at any one time. So different groups are working together and staying in different accommodations and try and do that. So we've been very lucky that we've been in an area where it's been quite light, quite frankly. Right now, the hospital is got 3 or 4 patients in, I think it is, and so there's nothing too serious. But we take it very, 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 very seriously. So if somebody gets a cold, he goes, checks, and if it's, for example, tested, not confirmed either way, he spends 4 or 5 days off, goes retest again. So we do go through that, and we manage our situation. So in terms of people, and it's critical, and everybody coming to site comes with a certificate before they arrive. So, touch wood, we've had one case here at Sigma, where one of our security individuals was diagnosed and was off for 7 days, but that was it. On the social front, we donated to the community 14 tons of disinfectant to the local hospitals. It had an overall effect of basically for the region of cleansing all the clinics, I think like 26 clinics, the main hospital, the areas where of commerce, the market, and things like that. Quite frankly, we calculated it had an effect of affected literally over the period 240,000 people. So it was a donation, and at the time, it was very hard to get. There'd been a run on it and it couldn't be delivered, and we managed through certain of our investors to be able to bring some material from the north, and that 14 tons then was distributed to the municipality, to the police, to the prison. There's a classic. So we've tried everything in our power to help where we can there, and then obviously lead by example, right? So our guys are very strict in terms of social distancing from the local community. I don't want to be this person that actually brings it to the area, considering it's so low. So everybody, as I say, gets here tested and cannot mix with the local community or the local town, which is about 20 kilometers away, for at least a period of 7 days that they have to be on site, and we accommodate them on site. So we're doing much the same, I think, as other groups. It does have the negative effect that certain things do get delayed. One drilling company, for example, were delayed 2 weeks with one of their guys had COVID, and everybody else had to go through the quarantine again and bring it. So you do see these delays, but I think they're overcomable. So I think that, and I see a lot of companies are doing the same and having positive reactions. You have heard the 1 or 2 exceptions, But in general, I think it's been quite positive, especially in this region.
Thank you, Calvin. Mike, how has the COVID affected your operations and are still affecting your operations today?
Well, of course, as we know, Brazil's been hard hit with COVID, and we're certainly sympathetic to all the people who are and the challenges that they're facing there. We're fortunate. We have a very small staff now. We've got a bit of exploration going on, getting into the detailed engineering phase, and not quite yet into the construction phase. So fairly small staffs. We have not seen any significant restrictions at either of our operations. We're able to work for the most part, practice proper social distancing. We, as Calvin mentioned, we're more concerned about, we do not want to bring COVID into our community. We don't want to be the source of an outbreak in the community. So we're very careful, as Calvin mentioned, with bringing folks in, going through a quarantine period, a testing period, and making sure that we don't bring COVID into the community. Our second property in Rio Grande do Sur state, Rio Grande do Sur has recently declared a black flag warning level. So we do have drills that are, we did have drills that were being mobilized to site that we've had to put on hold, and we're hopeful that that situation will resolve itself soon and that they're able to lift that black flag restriction. But for the most part, we have not seen any significant impact at our operations.
Thank you, Mike. Gilbert, you want to comment quickly on the impact of COVID, please, also?
Look, very, very early on, we communicated to our team in Brazil to strictly follow the government guidelines. I think from memory, that was back in January of last year. Within the communities that we've worked in, it's been, there has been sadly death from families and so forth. So that's a difficult situation for all these communities. Despite this, and because we've the leadership shown by our local guys, Joel and Victor, we've been able to conduct field operations, and whether it be in Rondônia, in our Espegon project, or launching our field exploration and field activities in Mato Grosso. We've always had very, very, very good health and safety in Meridian. And we were able to bring that experience down to our new project in Cabaçal, and really, I think that was actually a major benefit in the speed at which we could roll out our program, to be able to understand, okay, this is the protocol we're going to have to follow, this is the time it's going to take to do things, bang. There's no push, there's no pressure, just get it done in the time frame that's allowable. So yeah, no, it has impacted, but we've followed the guidelines. And I think only in the last 15 months, I can only recall, I think, one case in the weekly report. But no, we've been quite fortunate in that aspect. And sadly, it has affected our communities.
Thank you, Gilbert. And Miles, same thing for you, but considering the fact that you're also operating in other jurisdictions apart from Brazil, how do you compare between the countries and how LADA exploration was able to cope with the crisis, especially in Brazil, but also in the other countries where you are active?
Yeah, I mean, we use a lot of consultants, and we have small groups of people. It certainly slowed us down. I mean, on our own behalf, we got nothing done in Peru last year because really even locals weren't welcome in communities that were not their own, and certainly not anywhere from Lima. So a couple of our partners, joint venture projects, where they were close to an existing mining operation and within that infrastructure, were moved forward and work was done. And one of our joint ventures in Brazil also, again, it's a large group of people. They had procedures in place. We follow all the guidelines we can, and really the only instruction we give to the people around us is be safe. Like there's nothing we're doing that's more important than the safety of the people who work for us and who are around us. I think we're going to be living with COVID for many years now. I mean, hopefully it'll become less virulent as time goes by. But I think it's really something that we need to learn to live with. And take the care and put the procedures in place to keep your people safe, and as the others have commented, to not be a threat to the community and the people around you.
Thank you, Miles. Talking about growth here, I've mentioned at the beginning there was a positive momentum around mining, a positive momentum around the TSX venture for new financings, new listings. We know the challenge for a junior company to raise capital. It seems to be quite a good momentum for the whole sector. But Mike, let me ask you, there's a lot of junior explorers and small producers operating in Brazil. How do you see growth? Is there appetite for consolidation? How do you see the situation?
Yeah, I think there's a tremendous appetite for consolidation within the gold space within Brazil right now. We stay in pretty constant communication with a couple of intermediate producers, and we're continually looking at other projects, whether it be development projects, exploration projects, or even small producers. But we do see a tremendous opportunity to start rolling up some of these fantastic gold projects that we see in Brazil. Ourselves, I would personally like to see Amarillo be involved in that consolidation. I would love to pick up a small operating mine where we could bolt on some production to the front end of our development project. I like having a producer, a development project, and then an exploration project in the pipeline. So we see a lot of opportunity for that. We're constantly looking and talking to folks, and I think there is a lot of opportunity in Brazil.
Thank you, Mike. Gilbert, let me ask you about the Cabaçal project. Tell us about the importance of the human resource, the mineral resource factors to sustain growth for the future.
Oh, of course, thanks. They're hand in hand in any country, in any mining project. And when we looked at we went through a restructure, okay? And we had let go technicians, but we kept that core mining competence, because in any mining investment, you need to have a core management skill competence and something you can grow around. And we're seeing that now. To develop our mineral resource, we have to grow our human resource in Mato Grosso. So we're discussing this with the university in Cuiabá, and we've got young geologists. I mean, can you believe it? Young geologists joining the project now. So this is one of the things that we've been very keen on in all investments that I've done, but also particularly in this one, is okay to take this project forward through the following stages. You can subcontract this out to specialist firms and so forth, but you lose the bricks and mortar. So as we develop our mineral resource, which is largely been defined by the previous operator, BP and Rio Tinto, we are developing our Brazilian human resource, because this is just the key to success, whether it be the technician who's going out there doing water samples, or the geologist logging core, or the environment engineer interacting with the authorities. They've got to be incentivized, they've got to be retained, they've got to be grown. And that's just the success of any mining company. I carry that with everything I do. You've got to grow that human resource in a company.
Yes, thank you, Gilbert. And this is true also, because if we consider the transition into a low carbon future, the need for metals into that low carbon future, human resource, the quality of the local management teams also will be key for Brazil to embrace the challenge and be part of the low carbon, the new economy, the low carbon future. And talking about battery metals, maybe Calvin, you want to comment on how you see the future for Sigma along these trends?
Well, yes, I think on both sides. Maybe just a point on human resources. I was recently asked the question, what was your 3 challenges you had, putting this into construction? And it was very easy to answer. Well, first one was people, second one was people, and the third one was people, right? So quite frankly, this is key to any successful project. And it's also interesting when I listened to the previous panel, and it's really been the Sigma's experience, 40% of our workforce are female. For a mining company, that's a pretty high number. So, we are seeing a lot of skilled mining people, Brazilian mining women, especially in the areas of geology, metallurgy, environment. And in certain areas, I actually find them better than the men. They're just more dense into detail. But going forward in battery minerals, obviously, it's a huge thing. We are the strategic asset of lithium in the country, and growing at a rapid pace. And, you know, when you see the numbers coming out in terms of lithium and what it's going to be using, it's quite staggering to get an idea. And I just mentioned earlier, sort of ending up at the 5th biggest deposit in the world. But for that, even so, at these production rates of 400, I'm going to double the capacity in essentially 1 year after the production starts next year, 220,000, and double the capacity at 440,000. But the next gigafactory of Tesla needs 2 Sigmas, not 1. So the volumes are huge. And the biggest issue for facing what I call tier 1 battery makers is actually the supply of high-grade lithium, which is called, you know, high-purity lithium, lithium carbonate running at over 99.5%. Now that is complex and that is difficult. Currently, I think there are only 4 registered or certified producers of that grade, and it's expensive to do. So the quality of the material going in is critical. Now, Sigma, like I mentioned earlier, they seem to have the cleanest concentrate in the world. So clearly, it plays a big role in the value chain for tier 1 batteries, and that is where our material is going. So we've now a strategic tie-up with Mitsui, who literally are already in the tier 1 battery chain and need Sigma's lithium, because the only one they don't have is lithium. They have every other, they have the nickel, they have the cobalt. To have that. So it's a true strategic alliance in the sense that we get into the battery chain with them, with their balance sheet, it helps us, but also for them, apparently they tested all the mines in terms of material that seemed to be very efficient, and we've had some great efficiency numbers coming out of China. Testing our material has worked extremely well, and hence the tie-up. So pre-selling 6 years of material and Mitsui signing up 11 years of material to get an idea is because of the quality. So I do see for the better lithium projects, high quality projects, when I mean that purity, it's all about purity. There's a lot of lithium projects out there that just can't get the purity. So they go into tier 2 or tier 3 or maybe even to ceramic industry. But that's where I think there's going to be a shortage. So I think for Sigma here and for Brazil, where it's strategically placed to benefit from the big markets, the people are surprised to hear that Europe will overtake by 2024 the amount of EVs produced than China. So that amount of growth is so significant that, as I say, you're going to need a few Sigmas around if it's to take place. So I do think for this industry, it's very strong. There is a dire need to stop fossil fuels. I'm a firm believer in that. And batteries and renewable energy, and it doesn't have to be lithium batteries for that matter. There are other technologies, but it's going to have a critical role for the success of, if we are to make a difference in this climate change, sort of what I like to say, war that we're in. It's not a fight, it's a war. To be able to do something going forward quickly and sustainably. So yeah, I think we're in a good industry, and it's been a long time in coming, I'll say that. We've had 2 false starts, but I'd like to think now this is the real start. So here we go.
Thank you, Calvin. Miles, how does Lara view the opportunity and challenges of growing its business in Brazil, and how do you view the growth for the future in the coming years?
Well, I guess my biggest frustration with Brazil has been lack of access to new exploration claims. So our bread and butter is grassroots exploration. And in recent years, most of the ground I've picked up has been in Peru. So once we drill in the second quarter Planalto, I've only got 1 other project to drill in Brazil, whereas I've got 3 or 4 in Peru. So I'm really, really hoping that the minister's promise of having all of the backlogged license auctions done by middle of next year turns out to be the truth. Because really for me, growth of our business specifically in Brazil is dependent on the release of ground and making new exploration license areas available to us.
Thank you, Miles. So I would like to leave each panelist to say a few closing remarks, and that would be a good way to end this panel. So the floor is yours. We can start with, let's say, Gilbert.
Oh, thanks. I was first. I'm not on mute. Look, I think we actually entered a pretty exciting time for Brazil. It's just providing more opportunities for investment, and to be, we're a recent entrant into Brazil, only some 6-7 years, but I think it's myself only for the last 3. But no, I can give an international perspective. I've done audits in most countries, and how I see the interaction with communities, with regulators, and professionals, it's actually quite refreshing, and I'm very positive on it, particularly in Brazil.
Good. Thank you, Gilbert. Mike?
Thank you. And again, very happy to be here with the panel today. Very excited about Brazil and excited by Amarillo's opportunities in Brazil. As I mentioned, we're developing our Mara Rosa property. It's a 1 million ounce property today. We're doing exploration along a 20-kilometer trend. We believe we'll have multi-million ounces there as we do more exploration. So we're excited. We'll be announcing a construction decision over the next few months, initiating construction, moving ahead towards being a 100,000 ounce producer over the next couple of years. So very excited to bring that operation into production and to then continue our development and grow the property and to continue our development at our property in the south and to grow what we think will be a multi-million ounce district there as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Mike. Calvin, a few words to a few closing remarks.
Well, it'd be completely wrong for me to say that we weren't excited, but we're ecstatic here in Sigma going into production, right? So construction. So obviously what we always dream to in any exploration project, and I've been involved in exploration as well. And as I always say, 1 in 10, right? End up this, and when you end up one with, ends up being the 5th biggest lithium hard rock deposit, that's no mean feat. But I must say, this was a team effort with all stakeholders involved, from the local community to the government, and definitely the government change. And I again say it, it's a complete sea change in terms of the response one gets when you talk to the environmental agencies and you talk to the government mining regulator. And that is really positive for any new investors coming in now. And somebody also said earlier on the panel that it's very different, and it's a good time for people to take, if you are going to position in yourself in Brazil, it's probably one of the best times I've seen since I've been in, that's for sure. And for us, obviously, we are benefiting from that now, and it sort of moves strength to strength. And it's like anything in this industry, once you start your ball rolling down the hill, it gets your snowball gets bigger and bigger until it just runs on its own momentum. And it's literally that now. So the environmental guys are very familiar where we are. It's not something they're really on top of what's happening here. They come in here regularly to visit, as is the mining regulator. So right now we do have our wind in our sails, and I think probably other projects about the point about drilling made by Miles, I couldn't agree more that the country does need more drilling. We found this because we drilled. If we didn't drill, we wouldn't have found it. So I couldn't agree more that more money must be invested in drilling, and making that easier for people to invest and incentivize them to do it is correct. And I do believe that the local regulator has seriously recognized this and wants this to happen at a faster rate. And in fairness to us, we benefited. Over the last 2 years, definitely it's been a huge increase in rate to what we were doing before. To such an extent, I've got the environmental agency asking me when I'm going to file my next license, because it's a month after what I said I would. And normally it's the other way around, right? And now we're pushing, hey, Calvin, when are you going to file? And we're going to file literally just 30 days later. So guys, I would say it's a fantastic environment. The change is, in my personal opinion, massive. And we're delighted to be here and delighted to be moving into this construction and production phase.
Thank you, Calvin, and good luck with the next steps. And Miles, the final comments on your side?
Yeah, I mean, so looking a little bit bigger picture, obviously mining and resources and commodities in general are cyclical investments. And if you look back, most of the years since 2008, there were not people wanting to invest in our sector. They would prefer to invest in tech or in cannabis or pretty much anything except mining. And we're now in an environment where there is money available for our sector and people want to invest. And thankfully, Brazil is also very welcoming to that investment. So I think the stars have aligned. I think Brazil has got itself well organized at a time where there is money available. So there's money for exploration, there's money for new mines, there's money for mine expansions. And I think there's going to be a lot of new investment in Brazil. I think it's going to be a very good environment. And I'm very much looking forward to developing our own projects and hopefully finding some more while the opportunities abound.
Thank you very much, Miles. It's the best way to close the panel, and I'm quite impressed to see the positive comments. It's tough for all of us to be at home, but when we hear these positive comments in this panel and the previous panel, I think it's a good way to set the tone for the upcoming PDAC and how Brazil will have fruitful discussions in the next couple of days around PDAC. So thank you again, panelists, for being on this call today, and back to you, Carolina.
Thank you. Thank you, Calvin, Miles, Gilbert, Mike, for being here today. I'm also very, very happy to see and to hear all these positive comments. Definitely, I like Miles' last words, like stars are aligned. It is a great moment for the Brazilian mineral sector, and we are here. And I mean, the size of this Brazil PDAC, we have, I think, 30 companies sponsoring the event and like 90 speakers, 5 days of program. Is definitely like a sign that this is a great, great moment for the Brazilian mineral sector. And we're very excited to have you all here and working in Brazil and being successful. So thank you very much for your contribution. Thank you for being here today. I know Miles and Gilbert, it's late at night in Europe. So I really, really appreciate you taking time from your Friday night to join us here today. I would like to now, next on our list, I would like to invite Ambassador Pedro Borio. Ambassador Pedro Borio is the ambassador of Brazil to Canada. He arrived in Canada right before PDAC last year. Unfortunately, he wasn't able to join us last year, but he's here today, and he's here to say a couple words on Brazil-Canada relations and how the embassy is supporting those investments in Brazil. Ambassador, with you, please.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon to all of you. Good evening to those in Europe. It's a great pleasure for me to join you, at least virtually, since it's not possible to do it in person yet. I followed a couple of hours of the panels this afternoon, and all summed up, I can say that it's very pleasant to hear mostly positive comments about Brazil. It makes me even more confident that we are moving in the right direction. I would like, first of all, to felicitate the Chamber, Carolina, all of you, for the effort put together to not to let Brazil fall out of the PDAC tradition of having a very solid presence in Canada around the event and together with the Chamber. And was very happy also to see that you managed to secure participation of Minister Bento Albuquerque, a very good friend of ours, and of Secretary Alexandre Vidigal. Those of you that have been with me or in touch with me know that I tend to repeat the same thing all the time, and I would like to take the liberty of doing it again, that the only bad question for me is the one that is not asked. So we are very, very eager to be in touch with all of you, to hear your comments, to try to help you streamline even more things and make it happen. I personally, I am convinced that yes, this phrase about the alignment is a very good one, because it reflects something. Mining is as old as Brazil, is part of Brazil's history, but my family has a certain connection with mining in the south of Brazil, and I had the pleasure of working with Eliezer Batista, the guy who dreamed Carajás, the father of modern Vale. So one could certainly see a few years ago that mining was out of fashion. Well, I had the pleasure of working also in San Francisco, very close to the Silicon Valley, and all the time something that impressed me very much was it was almost impossible to separate the high-tech trends of the Silicon Valley, to a renewal, a deep renewal in mining. That pointed to Brazil, that pointed to Bolivia, that pointed to Peru, to Chile, countries, by the way, that work very closely with us, either more and more in South America and also here in Canada. We have a very easy relation with the fellow embassies here, and we certainly want to keep moving and identifying bottlenecks or suggestions that we can make. And we do it knowing that we have a ministry right now that is committed towards modernity, innovation, unblocking bureaucracies and stuff like that. So I'll be brief, but I just wanted to thank you all for the comments, for the participation, and encourage you to be with us and through the year to be participating in the events that the Chamber is going to be put together. They intend to have at least 8 or 9 governors of Brazilian states doing virtual road shows. This is also an opportunity for each one of you to raise specific questions regarding this or that segment. So in the case of the embassy, and also let me stress of the consulates in Toronto, Montreal, Vancouver, we are very eager to go to discuss specific points of interest with you, to try to help you navigate the complexities and also perhaps to change some bureaucracies or make further improvements and see things happen. So I wish you all a very good PDAC and a lot of Brazil in it, more Brazil in your future. And thank you very, very much. Thank you, Carolina, and in the Chamber, to all of you for the wonderful effort you have successfully put together. Thank you.
Thank you, Ambassador.
Thank you, Ambassador.
Thank you, Ambassador. Thank you for your support. Thank you for your partnership. And we look forward, as the Ambassador mentioned, to continue the discussion, not only during PDAC, but further throughout the years. I mean, mining, again, as I mentioned, is in a great moment. And we look forward to continue working with all to help understand and invest in the Brazilian mining sector. Before we finish, I would like to invite Roberto Xavier, Executive Director of AGIMBE, to say a few words and close this event as well. So Roberto, please, mic is yours.
All right. Hi, Carolina. Greetings to all the panelists and all the external participants of this session. Well, thanks for giving me the honor to make the closing remarks of the Brazil-Canada Mining Insights session. Well, first of all, on behalf of AGIMBE, Agency for Development and Innovation of the Brazilian mining sector, I'd like to thank all the CEOs in this session for having shared with us their views and perspectives regarding the main trends and challenges for the global mining industry, and in particular, the implications for the ongoing and future mining and mineral exploration projects in Brazil. Special thanks go to the Honorable Mr. Bento Albuquerque, Brazil's Minister of Mines and Energy, and Mr. Pedro Borio, Ambassador of Brazil to Canada, for their messages of enthusiasm regarding the current scenario of the Brazilian mineral sector and the long-lived and prosperous Brazil-Canada relationship in this area. Here a small comment. I just applied 2 words here, long-lived and prosper. It sounded like Spock from the sci-fi movie Star Trek. Apologies for that. It was not my intention, but when I was writing up these words. I could not find much better terms to replace them. Anyway, I'd also like to remind you, but particularly that this session that ends now marks the onset of a series of other sessions involving Brazil and Canada at the virtual PDAC 2021 that will take place from Monday to Thursday next week, as Carolina already pointed out. It's important to say, however, that the program of these sessions have been put together by a joint Brazil-Canada effort led by ADIMB, BCCC, IBRAN, and ABPM. Needless saying that BCCC had a pivotal role in this process. I'd like to strongly encourage, particularly the external participants, to join us next week in the Brazil-Canada and Brazilian mining sessions, because it's going to be a robust and awesome program. I know I'm biased saying that. I'm aware of that. But anyway, it's going to be very robust because it will cover a large range of topics relevant to the mineral sector for both Canada and Brazil. And Carolina already mentioned a lot of them, but let's be repetitive here. Mineral legislation, taxation, and current programs devised for boosting the mineral sector in Brazil, investment scenarios, and the new search spaces for mineral exploration in Brazil, projects and opportunities, service solutions for the Brazilian mining sector, ESG insights, women in the Brazilian mining industry, and etc. These topics will count with the active participation of government representatives, mining associations, academics, consultants, and above all, our sponsors, to whom we'd like to express our deepest gratitude for supporting these events. Without no further ado, thank you very, very much, and enjoy the show next week. Cheers, everyone. Please stay safe wherever you are. Thank you. Back to you, Carolina.
Wow, nice words, Roberto. Thank you very much. And I would share my words with you. I would like to thank again the organizing committee. This was definitely a joint effort. Like when we had our first meeting, I feel like many months before, we didn't really know how we were going to pull off an online PDAC. And here we are on day one and looking forward to a great event next week as well. It was a great start today. So again, I would like to thank all our sponsors. As Roberto said, without your support, we wouldn't be able to organize these discussions, as well as our partners, our members, our guests, staff, volunteers, everyone involved in this, in putting this event together. So Roberto, thank you, and thank you for you, and thank you for Gustavo for all his hard work
My
as
pleasure.
well in helping us with this. And we've been working together for many years now, putting PDAC, Brazil PDAC together, and we couldn't let this year be different. So,
That's right.
Right? We also like to, if you wanted to learn more about the BCC, if you wanted to learn more about ADIMB, please, you can find our information into the exhibition hall as well, together with the information of all our sponsors today. Please surf around, take a look of their projects, their institutional information. There's a lot of shareholder information there as well, a lot of investment information too. Please keep following us on social media so you stay tuned on all our activities and what's coming next. Thank you very much for joining us today. And I will echo Roberto's word, stay safe wherever you are, stay home. Thank you very much.